Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. The two boys sat at their desks as quiet as can be. Why are we here? I want to become a ninja, not sit in a class, asked one of the children, breaking the silence and causing a tick mark to appear on the young Chunin's head. The Chunin's name was Amino Iruka, and he was there trying to help the children enroll into the academy, with the help of the Hokage, of course. The Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, just chuckled at the display of impatience. He looked at the child who spoke, and then at his counterpart, his twin brother, with a calculating look. He knew the two boys were twins, but they were as different from each other as two complete strangers could be. The loud one who spoke was Uzumaki Menma. He was a loud, obnoxious little brat that always had an opinion. He spoke his mind and it always got him in trouble. He was honest, too honest, and it sometimes got him into more trouble than can be helped. It's not that he can't keep things to himself, it is as if everything should be shared. One time, he got into trouble with the Hyuga clan for trying to befriend the young heiress. It wasn't his fault though, it was in his nature. He was very kind, but didn't take too kindly to those who cause others pain. If one could identify him by an object, it would be the sun, shining, bright and bubbly, spreading its warmth among the people it touched. His brother, on the other hand, Uzumaki Naruto, was as quiet as the dead. If you didn't know better, one would think he was dead. All he did was read his books, and keep to himself. The only time he spoke was if asked a question or speaking with his brother. Many people don't even know what he sounded like. In retrospect, many people would call him cold and distant. He was the moon, where Menma was the sun. Cold, calculative and eerily silent. Naruto also had some experience in stealth, sneaking up on the Hokage when he was least expecting it, almost giving the old man a heart attack. The two boys were only 8 and showed an inkling of genius. In their own ways, they both were geniuses. Naruto was silent and had his book smarts, while Menma was loud but had the physical strength. Menma also learned what Naruto learned by being told how to do things and listening to his brother. Naruto wasn't as physically fit as Menma, but made up for it in his stealth and strategies. It is uncertain who was older, but the Hokage knew that both boys will become strong and powerful shinobi when they got older. At this present moment, they were enrolling into the academy to begin their long pursuit of becoming a shinobi. Truth was, they were already close to being shinobi material. They both knew how to walk on water and how to climb trees using chakra. When asked by the Hokage how they learned, Menma blurted out that Naruto taught him that, and how Naruto learned it all from a book. They were twin brothers, yet completely opposite. "Come on, old man, this is boring. Nay, Aniki, tell them to let us graduate already. We know most of the stuff here anyway," cried Menma, trying to get his quiet brother to negotiate with the Hokage and the Chunin instructor on their behalf. Menma knew Naruto had the brain smarts and knowledge to barter with them and come out on top. This time, however, he remained silent. The Hokage chuckled again, taking a puff of his pipe before stating, "All shinobi begin somewhere, Menma-kun, and although you have knowledge on how to complete some of the shinobi exercises, that is not enough to warrant a complete understanding on becoming a shinobi. But I want to become Hokage and take your hat from you. I don't want someone else to take it when you keel over," spoke Menma as the Hokage chuckled again. Iruka, on the other hand, looked furious. He was about to admonish Menma before the Sandaime spoke once more. "That may be true, Menma-kun. However, becoming the Hokage is not about how much jutsu you know and how strong you are. It's about protecting those near to you. It's about protecting the village and possessing the will of fire. It is about using your strength to ensure that the king is protected. It is a long and arduous road, but with patience and training, I guarantee that you'll become the Hokage." As the Sandaime finished his speech, he looked into the eyes of Menma and saw the glowing will of fire. He looked towards Naruto and found he wasn't in his seat. Searching around the classroom, he found Naruto enter through the door, appearing as quietly as possible. "When the hell did he leave? I didn't even sense him go," thought the Sandaime, whilst looking at Iruka with a raised eyebrow. Iruka looked at him and shook his head, indicating that he also didn't know when Naruto left. As the Sandaime and Iruka finished all the necessary paperwork for the two children, they left the academy and charged straight into Ichiraku Ramen Bar. It was one of the only places where the twins were looked at as more than trash. The only place where they could have a conversation with the owners and not get kicked out. It was also the only other place that felt like home, and for that, the Sandaime was disheartened. He knew the reasoning behind it. He was a part of the cause of the twins being disliked. However, he was doing a favor for the village. He knew that enemies would have gotten game if they had known that the Konoha was weakened after that incident 8 years ago. An incident that till this day cannot be fully explained. An incident in which many S-rank secrets were established, but only one secret remained with the Sandaime. And that secret he would take to his grave. 3 pork and 3 miso ramen please old man, called Menma as he walked through the flaps leading into the small ramen bar. Hi Ayame, how are you? He also asked in a slightly high-pitched. He was after all excited to begin his journey of the shinobi. Behind him the Sandaime chuckled again at the kid's antics. He could not get over how much joy Menma brought to those in his presence. As he though this, he took his seat next to Menma and ordered 1 pork ramen as well. Hi Hokage-sama, called both the young girl and her father. Ayame was a 14-year-old who helped her father run the bar. She left the ninja academy at a young age and started working with her father. Her father was a civilian, but Ayame showed some promise in the shinobi arts. She was a certified ninja chef. A chef with skills in the ninja arts. Ichiraku Tuchi was proud of his daughter. He told her all the time. The old man was a loving and gentle father whom lost his wife when Ayame was in the academy, resulting in her early leaving. He did regret that, but Ayame was also strong-willed and decided to help her father in the kitchens and learn the trade. The Hokage looked to Naruto and when he got the boy's attention, was going to ask what he wanted. As if reading the Sandaime's mind, Menma chirped in and said that the 3 miso ramen were for Naruto, while he was eating the 3 pork ramen. The Hokage smiled at this and thanked Kami that Menma was caring enough to order for both twins. He was slightly afraid of the money he'd be spending today. Just as he finished his thoughts, the ramen arrived, and each customer ate it with gusto. Menma finished first with a contented burp and sigh, whilst Naruto finished in a more dignified and quieter manner. The Sandaime felt the presence of his Anbu guards and knew that he had to get to a meeting with his counselors. He paid for the meal and bid the twins and the ramen bar's owner goodbye. When the Sandaime left, the twins walked the streets alone till they arrived at one of the training grounds. Training Ground 7, which had a small creek running through it. Once there, both boys stretched and started running laps. After the laps the boys rested and started on their chakra control exercises. The last thing they did was spar before they left to go home. Tomorrow was a long day after all. Who knew that the academy would akin to a long and arduous mission? Neither boy noticed the lady hiding in the tree watching their every move. The academy was going to be blooming this year with young shinobi, wannabes, looking to have a career as a ninja of Konoha. The class was at its largest that they had to split them into 2. Everything was going fine until a loud yell caused everyone to look in the direction of Menma. Why the hell am I not with my Aniki? Me and him were supposed to be in the same class? Iruka looked at the scene with a tick mark, trying to cover his concern. It wasn't good for academy teachers to take a liking to one or more students. This would seem bias and affect those around. Iruka knew what it was like to be separated from another person, so he sympathized with the young ninja in training. But being the head of the academy, Iruka had a job to do. Separate the twins. Everything was fine for the first week, when Iruka would resort to the conversation which the Sandaime had with the twins the day before the academy began. He also threatened to get the Hokage on Menma if he kept misbehaving. That however didn't work so well, so Iruka resorted to bribery to keep Menma happy. This worked for the first week, but after that, nothing short of the Hokage visiting would keep Menma in his place long enough for the classes to end. Naruto on the other hand was simply reading his book whilst observing those around. He had a feeling that not all of the students will make it to the graduation day and even less will make it to Genin. As he looked around, he noticed some ninjas in training that stood a chance at making it. First were the clan heirs, and although she looked like she was nothing but a gossiper, Naruto knew that Yamanaka Ino was a part of a clan renowned for their intelligence gathering. The young Yamanaka was dressed in a white shirt and denim shorts. Next to her stood one of her friends, a pink-haired girl with whom he didn't know and who wasn't a part of any clan. The other people he noticed were the heir to the Akamichi clan and the Nara clan. Both boys were at the back of the class, and although it looked like the Nara boy, Shikimaru, was dozing off, Naruto could see the way he was inspecting each of the young ninjas in training. The Akamichi, however, Shoji, if he recalls correctly, was busy eating a bag of chips. Naruto knew about the two clans' alliance and that with the Yamanaka. The famous Ino Shika Cho trio would definitely be reunited as a genin cell. Looking around more, Naruto found the young Hyuga heiress which his twin had saved from bullies. The young girl was shyly shooting glances at Menma and turning slightly red in the face. Naruto knew that the girl was crushing on her brother, but knew nothing would come of it. Who would want a prestigious clan heiress fall in love with some lowly clan-less orphan, who has no one but his brother to watch his back? As harsh as it sounded, Naruto was a realist and knew that the current head of the Hyuga would definitely dislike that idea very much. Looking around further, Naruto found a boy wearing a hoodie covering his face staring at him intently. The Aburame clan heir, Shino, gave him a nod and turned to look at another boy. This ninja in training was another boisterous boy who was laughing at his brother's outburst. The dog on his head yapping along as well. Kiba of the Inuzuka clan. Technically Kiba was not an heir to the clan, but only the son of the current clan head. The strongest Inuzuka was often regarded as the clan head, however, they did get help from each member of their clan. The young dog was called Akamaru and was sitting comfortably on Kiba's head. He returned his look back to Shino and gave him a second nod before walking over to his brother, who was walking over to Kiba and looking to neuter the dog boy. That wouldn't be good for him nor his brother. Just as he reached his brother, a young ninja in training walked right in the middle of Kiba and Menma, causing most of the girls in the class to swoon. Kiba was infuriated and Menma was leaking little bouts of killer intent. Not enough to cause a stir, but enough for Naruto to notice. Naruto walked and whispered into his brother's ear to forget about fighting. Kiba on the other hand didn't have someone who was level-headed to get him to remain calm. "Hey duck butt, what is your problem?" Kiba asked in a loud enough voice to get everyone in the room to look in his direction. The other boy looked at him and scoffed without bothering to reply. Just as Kiba was about to speak again, the same boy whispered from behind him. "Got a problem, mutt?" Kiba turned around with his arms outstretched ready to tear into the other boy, only to feel the sensei stop him and separate them before anything could happen. "Kiba, Sasuke, I'm very disappointed in you both," admonished Iruka, keeping them apart from each other. Sasuke had a smug smirk on his face whilst Kiba was turning slightly red from anger. Naruto knew who Sasuke was, the young prodigy of the Uchiha clan. He was hailed as a second coming of his brother, Itachi, who left the academy the same year that he entered. A fully matured Sharingan by the time he was 8. Sasuke on the other hand hadn't unlocked his clan's Kekkei Genkei, and until he did, he knew he didn't match up to his brother. The class got settled and split into two after the small altercation, and although Menma wanted to be in the same class as Naruto, it didn't work out like that. All of the heirs of the major clans in Konoha were in the same class as Naruto, and this caused some suspicion to develop in his young mind, especially the method in which him and his brother got split up. Menma on the other hand was bored out of his head. His only respite was talking to a friend of his he hadn't seen in a long time. That however got completely crushed when said friend didn't want to be associated with him. He still remembers how they met. Playing on the playground, her with her long pink hair tied into a ribbon. Till her mother came and took her away. He hadn't seen Sakura since then. And now she showed no interest in rekindling that old friendship. What a great way to start at the academy. Later that night, after the twins completed their training, Menma asked Naruto if there were any peoples of interest in the class, knowing full well that Naruto would have checked everyone out anyway. "Well," came Naruto's soft reply, "there are a few clan heirs in the classroom that I'm in." Naruto recalled all the information and relayed it Menma. However, Naruto continued, "The question to answer is why we really got split up. Like I said, I'm in the class with the heirs and more than 70% of your class will most likely drop out before the second year." Menma nodded, and considered the question before wishing his brother good night. Naruto found this situation to be a problem, and with all problems comes a solution. So he stayed up longer than Menma to ponder on the solution at hand. What he came up with wasn't good, and he knew that someone at the academy was going to mess with one of them. Being in the harder class, Naruto figured it could be him, but then again Menma barely shows his smart side. Unknowingly keeping it hidden, but Naruto knew that he had potential. On the other scale, it could be the Hokage testing them. He felt like he couldn't trust the Hokage and needed to find out why. The man spoke about the title of Hokage like people should strive to die like them. Naruto, however, knew that dying wouldn't solve anything. With that thought in mind, he drifted off to sleep. Unknown to both boys, the Hokage was watching and listening in on their conversation. He knew how skilled the twins were and he knew the potential Menma had. He just wasn't too sure what to do about Naruto. The next few days were quiet and the academy progressed smoothly. Well, almost. I'm so bored, complained Menma. At the exclamation, the teacher threw him out of the class. With nothing better to do, Menma roamed the academy. He went to his brother's class and saw him sitting in silence reading a book. As if hearing his thoughts, Naruto turned to the door and saw Menma standing. Quietly and with stealth, Naruto left the classroom and caught up with Menma. The twins went and trained together for the rest of the day until Menma came up with a brilliant idea. Well, in his mind it was brilliant. The idea came to him when he thought about getting revenge on one of the stall owners and decided that he and his brother should prank them. Naruto decided that he would agree with his twin, but decided to turn it into a training exercise. The objective was not to get caught. From that day on, everyone started to fear the pranking geniuses and even the Hokage had to be careful. Time skip 4 years, graduation day. The end of the academy couldn't have come at a better time. 4 years of boredom was never good for the twins. The first year was just as Naruto suspected. Many academy teachers tried to sabotage Menma and each time they tried, they got pranked later. The Hokage found out about the sabotaging and decided to do something about it. Unfortunately, he found out close to the end of the year, so he thought that most of the damage had been done. By the beginning of the second year, both classes had merged, with many students dropping out and transferring to the civilian school or taking up their parents' trade. Iruka was much more lenient with Menma, and with Naruto around, Menma didn't play up as much. Problem was that more times than not, the twins were gone and pranking people. No one could find them except the Hokage. He would get in contact with Iruka and assign him the task of returning the twins to class. Many people didn't know this and they all thought that it was Iruka who had a hunch and followed it to catch the young ninjas in training. Many of the pranks caused by them were known thanks to Menma's honesty. Looking back now, Iruka should have asked at the beginning of each class if they were going to pull a prank. Problem was he had a hunch that the twins pull pranks on the fly, with little to no preparation. Oh, how wrong he was. Each prank was planned and involved precision, skill and timing. The classroom was abuzz with noise as Iruka walked in. "Quiet please," he spoke, but to no avail. Gaining a tick mark, he screamed at the top of his lungs, "Quiet!" At the outburst, all of the students got serious. Now that is more like it. Welcome to the academy exams, the next step on your journey onto becoming a shinobi of Konoha. Iruka stated with as much pride as he could muster. At his words, most of the kids cheered. He needed to give them some hope. Some sense of hope before they realize what it truly requires in being a shinobi. The test is in 3 parts, first the written, and then the taijutsu portion. Lastly will be the ninjutsu. There are only 3 jutsu needed to pass. As Iruka stated this, his assistant, Mizuki, walked around and handed out all the tests. Mizuki had been a part of the old class and was discreetly against Menma and Naruto. No one knew that it was Mizuki that pulled the strings behind the splitting up of the twins in the first year. He was also one of the main instigators behind the sabotage of Menma's time in the academy. Although that was the case, Menma didn't need special assistance and always had Naruto to fall back onto. Mizuki-sensei is handing out the test, and when I say begin, you can start, Iruka spoke again. And just like that, the exams began. At the end of the written exam, Iruka stayed behind to mark the written portion of the exam while Mizuki took the young shinobi in training out to the field to complete the taijutsu portion. The next bouts will be simple. Taijutsu only is to be used and I will be your opponent. Last for longer than 30 seconds and you will pass. If you are able to, try and get me out of the rink as well. This will ensure that you pass with flying colors. As Mizuki said that, he called each shinobi in training to come forward. Naruto noticed that Mizuki was not going full out with all of his opponents, and although that was the case, many struggled to last longer than the 30 seconds. But those that did gave up shortly after reaching the mark. This of course was still a pass, so it really didn't matter. The clan heirs were the only exceptions to the rules. all passed with flying colors. Next up is Menma. As Mizuki got ready to go to work, Naruto noticed the air around Mizuki shift. He felt the slight rise of killer intent from the Chunin, and he knew that Menma felt it too. The twins looked at each other briefly, before Menma walked into the ring. From the start of the bell, Mizuki was hitting harder and moving faster than he normally did with the other students. This didn't faze Menma though, as he was easily keeping up. Mizuki threw a left punch which Menma dodged, only for Mizuki to follow up with a right leg sweep which Menma jumped over. Mizuki had him in the air and was about to punch before he felt his chin get hit hard by a foot, which was connected to Menma's leg. Mizuki at that moment was flung outside the ring and Menma completed his backflip to land on the ground. This stopped the fight due to Mizuki being pushed out. The class was stunned. It all happened too fast and they barely saw what happened. Mizuki tested his jaw to see that it was still in good condition. He knew that he lost, but couldn't believe it. This student had to be no more than 13 and yet he was already a high Chunin level fighter. No one commented on what happened because they couldn't believe it. Here was this clown in the classroom, hitting a Chunin with a move that they didn't see coming. It was enough to get the students to think twice before picking a fight. 2 out of the whole class however felt the need to challenge the young Uzumaki, but knowing now was not the time. "Naruto, you're up next," Mizuki stated with barely hidden contempt. He was not supposed to let Menma pass, but pass he did. As Naruto stood in front of Mizuki, the air around him began to change. Mizuki looked at Naruto and tried very hard to repress a shiver. He saw in the boy's eyes the intent to harm. Mizuki was told that Naruto was quiet but also skilled, but looking at this student now, he felt the need to walk away and forget his mission. Naruto, in the eyes of Mizuki at that moment, looked like a true shinobi, not some academy student. As the bell rang, Mizuki charged in for a left hit, only to hit nothing but air. As he looked down to where he knew Naruto had gone, he was hit very hard in the jaw by Naruto's foot. The exact same spot got hit, only this time harder. Menma was easy to forgive people, if they had a reason for it. Naruto on the other hand was akin to an executioner. Mess with either twin, and Naruto would come for revenge. Menma would pull pranks alongside Naruto, but Naruto showed no mercy if he felt the line was crossed. As Mizuki was flying in the air, he tried to flip and land on his feet. He did so only to feel a punch coming towards his face. He blocked the punch, and dodged to the side where he retaliated with a punch of his own. This left him wide open for a leg to hit him in the ribs, quietly knocking the air from his lungs. Mizuki moved back once more to get some space only to find a fist coming for his face. Ducking under, Mizuki grabbed Naruto and tossed him in the air. As Naruto was tossed, his right foot came up and barely missed the Chunin's jaw once more. How skilled are these two? Mizuki thought. Naruto landed in the middle of the rink and waited patiently. The time was running out slowly and Mizuki felt the need to hit Naruto. He ran in again and tried punch sweep combo only to hit nothing but air. Naruto was too fast for Mizuki, and they both knew it. Mizuki hopped back once more just in time as Naruto was pulling the same trick as Menma had, this time just missing the Chunin's jaw. Mizuki was about to charge again when the bell rang and it caught Mizuki off guard. Mizuki had almost failed his mission and had only one chance to complete it. Next is Ino. The young Yamanaka heiress couldn't get over how the fight developed. Both fights actually. Who would have thought that the twins could stand toe-to-toe with a Chunin? As the fight between Mizuki and Ino came to an end, Haruka walked out and asked for everyone to go into the room for the final test. "Okay, now the final part is going to begin. When I call your name, please enter the room next door and complete the required jutsu." Each student had passed the final portion of the exam with flying colors. Even the Sandame was chuckling in the corner as each student completed their jutsu. He congratulated each and every one of them. There were only 3 people left to pass. "Menma, you're up," Haruka called, only to get no reply. Mizuki got a curious look on his face and decided to see why Menma didn't come running. "Menma, you don't want to fail, do you?" Mizuki asked, only to get blank stares from everyone, as they couldn't find Menma or Naruto in the room. Mizuki walked into the classroom and approached Haruka to state that Menma and Naruto weren't there. "Does this mean that they both fail?" Haruka asked, looking at the Sandame, only for him to erupt into smoke and Menma to be on the ground laughing his head off. Iruka got a tick mark on his head, but smirked nonetheless. You passed the transformation, but can you pass the Kawarimi? As Iruka said that, he was looking into the splitting image of Naruto. The difference between Naruto and Menma were their clothing. Menma enjoyed dark maroon and most of his bodysuit composed of the color. Naruto on the other hand preferred to wear black as his color of choice with a hint of orange. So when Iruka saw Naruto there, he got another tick mark. Menma, I said Kawarimi not transform into your brother. As Iruka said this, a voice behind asked, but I did Iruka-sensei. Both Mizuki and Iruka spun in shock to reveal not one but 5 Menmas. When they turned around again, they were looking at the Sandame Hokage, the Yondaime Hokage, the Nidaime Hokage and the Shodeme Hokage. Iruka, having enough of the prank, gave both the twins their headbands and told them to wait in the classroom. Mizuki on the other hand was too stunned to believe what had actually transpired. The twins pulled one last prank which actually got them to pass the jutsu portion of the exam. Frustrated and angry, Mizuki left the office to report the failure of his mission. The next day, all of the students were sitting in the classroom chatting like there was no tomorrow. Quiet please, Iruka called, only for the noise to raise a decibel. Shut it, he screamed, silencing all the genin in the class. Thank you. Now that I have your attention, I will announce the team placements. Before I do that however, I would like to say that I'm very proud of each and every one of you. You did a good job in this class over the past 4 years and I look forward to hearing about the many adventures that you have in the future. Now in stating that, I also have here the Rookie of the Year listings. The classroom waited in silence as Iruka spoke. Many believed that the only people to have come close to the Rookie of the Year were Sasuke, Kiba and Shino. The twins weren't in class most of the time to be nominated, so they were out. The Rookie of the Year goes to Uchiha Sasuke. At Iruka's words all of the girls screamed, applauded and praised the young Uchiha who didn't react at all to the information. He just sat looking out the window. Now the Kunoichi of the Year is a 3-way tie between Haruno Sakura, Yamanaka Ino and Hyuga Hinata. All 3 girls averaged out to come in equal position. Iruka explained, noting how each Kunoichi reacted differently to the news. Hinata had her head on the desk, appearing as if she were asleep. Sakura was throwing glances at Ino every now and then, trying to put as much venom and hate into her looks as possible. Ino on the other hand was quiet with a large grin on her face. Okay, moving on. The final item on the list is team placements. Here Iruka's gaze landed on Menma then on Naruto. He knew the team placements and knew what each child would be doing in the future. Both Naruto and Menma caught the look on Iruka's face. They knew they were going to be split up. Team 1 consists of, no one really paid attention to Iruka until their names were called. Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura and Uzumaki Menma are on Team 7. Your Junin sensei asked that you meet him at Training Ground 3 as soon as possible. With that, Menma looked at Naruto as if asking a silent question. Naruto knew what was going on. He had explained the separation to Menma, but he still couldn't get over the fact that his brother was on another team. Menma looked disheartened, but walked out the door nonetheless. Sakura and Sasuke left first in the hopes of learning something from their sensei. Hyuga Hinata, Inuzuka Kiba and Aburame Shino will be on Team 8. As Iruka finished that sentence, a young kunoichi with long dark flowing hair and red eyes appeared. She looked at Hinata, who looked up from her desk, with a smile. Team 8 follow me please. Kiba was gobsmacked. He knew that kunoichi had perfect figures, but he still couldn't get over his sensei. She was the epitome of goddess. Kiba basically felt love at first sight. Without looking over her shoulders, the Junin sensei left, closely followed by Hinata and Shino. Kiba had to run to catch up or he'd lose sight of their sensei. What the Team 8 members didn't know was that they were being tested as soon as their sensei entered the academy. Team 9 is still in circulation, so Team 10 will be Yamanaka Ino, Nara Shikamaru and Akamichi Choji. Your Junin sensei asked that you meet him at the place where the alliance stands. With that, Shikamaru led the way, followed closely by Choji and a grumbling Ino. They all knew where to go. It was a part of their training. The 3 clans did have a strong bond and alliance which could not be broken. Naruto, it says here that you are to return home. Iruka spoke in a soft tone. Naruto merely nodded before making his way back home. Halfway there, a few civilians decided that they wanted a piece of the Kyuubi brat. They started running towards him with a variety of objects such as knives, cleavers, bats, bars and the occasional kunai. He knew that he was a shinobi now, and that harming civilians could lead to devastating consequences. With that in mind, Naruto hightailed it out of there, too quick for any of the civilians to catch. Reaching his favorite training ground, he was slightly surprised to see a purple-headed kunoichi wearing a dark orange miniskirt and a long brown jacket staring at him with mirth and a slightly predatory look. Now Naruto knew he was in some sort of trouble and couldn't run his way out of this one. "Hey Gaki, what you doing?" asked the slightly deranged-looking kunoichi. Before Naruto could reply however, he was knocked onto the ground and had his hands tied with chakra absorption chains and his head covered with some type of sack. He was then transferred to an unknown location via Shunshin. Menma, Sasuke and Sakura were slightly disappointed when they arrived at their appointed training ground. Their sensei was doing nothing but staring at a large stone. He didn't acknowledge any of them, just stood there staring. Sakura was about to speak when their sensei spoke in a cool voice. "Welcome to Training Ground 3. We will start off with introductions and proceed from there." The three genin stood silent in wait. "My name is Hitaki Kakashi." Here Kakashi turned and faced them, showing his one-eyed smile. He was a tall man and had silver gravity-defying hair. His face was mostly covered by a mask and his other eye was covered with his forehead protector. He wore normal dark blue Junin attire with a vest over that. "I have many likes and some dislikes. I don't have a hobby and my dream is to see that you all pass this test." The three genin looked at Kakashi questioningly. They wondered what test, but before they could voice their thoughts, Kakashi continued. "Now who is next?" Kakashi asked looking at the only girl on the team. "My name is Haruno Sakura, I like a certain someone." Here she looked to her right where both boys stood eyeing her wearily. "I also like reading. I hate people who make fun of others and my future dream is too." Here Sakura blushed and stopped talking altogether. Kakashi looked at the scene with sad eyes. He knew the reality of the shinobi world and knew what might befall his student if she doesn't commit to training. Kakashi's eye landed on Sasuke and waited for him to speak. "My name is Uchiha Sasuke. There are things that I like but many more that I dislike. My dream, no the reality is that I will avenge my clan and kill a certain man." Kakashi knew who Sasuke was referring to and hoped his other students didn't know. Menma however was nodding as if he knew who and what Sasuke was talking about. That was something Kakashi would have to ask later on. "Okay, you're up." Kakashi spoke looking at Menma and gaining his attention. "Ohio Inu-san." Menma spoke, catching Kakashi slightly off guard and almost causing him to react. "You know who I am, so why do I have to introduce myself?" Menma continued, giving Kakashi some time to readjust to the outburst. "I do know you, but does your teammates?" Here Menma thought for a bit before looking at his two teammates. "I guess not. Well, I like my Aniki and ramen, especially ramen from Ichiraku." Menma replied, salivating slightly from his mouth at the word ramen. "I hate being separated from my Aniki and stupid people who can't tell a kunai from a ceiling scroll." Everyone could feel the killer intent roll off of the boy but paid it off. Kakashi figured that he was doing it unintentionally. "My dream is to become the best shinobi this world has ever seen." Kakashi looked at each student before turning to look at the memorial stone once more. The silence lasted for a full minute before Kakashi spoke up. "This stone has the names of Konoha's heroes written on it. It is an honor to be placed here." At his words, his students looked at the stone. "My friends' names are on this stone and one day mine will be too. But before then I hope to create the best team Konoha has ever seen, even stronger than the legendary Sannin." Here Kakashi looked at each of his students. "My friend once told me that those who break the shinobi code are trash, but those that abandon your comrades are worse than trash. He said that to me the same day he died. His name is on this stone." With that revelation, the three genin looked at their sensei with wide eyes before looking back at the stone, a slightly more somber look on their faces. This was the reality of being a shinobi and Kakashi wanted his team to know it. "Tonight will be a survival test that you will undertake. This test is to determine if you remain a genin or get sent back to the academy." Sasuke looked at Kakashi with slight anger and pure determination. Sakura looked shocked and looked close to voicing her opinion. Menma however looked relieved and Kakashi wasn't sure why. We completed our genin test. Why do we have to take another one? Sakura asked, anger clearly evident in her voice. Though that were the case, everyone knew she was covering her nervousness. Well, the final decision, if you pass or fail, is up to me. Pass and I will train you to surpass me, to fulfill your dreams. Fail and you get sent back to the academy. Kakashi spoke in a bored tone. The three genin stood stock still as they replayed what they had heard over and over again in their minds. They couldn't believe it, even Menma. He knew that they were to be tested, but didn't think the results were this extreme. He knew he had to pass to prove that he was a strong shinobi. Prove it to everyone, especially his brother. Naruto didn't know what had happened to him. When he opened his eyes, he noticed that he was in a dark room lit only with candles and was looking into the eyes of the kunoichi he briefly met in his favorite training ground. So, is it okay to get kidnapped by Konoha shinobi? Naruto asked, right before getting hit across the face with a right hook. What is your name? The kunoichi asked, showing some mirth on her psychotic face. Naruto was about to answer before he got hit again, but on the other side of his face. Naruto started seeing stars from that hit, and knew he was in some serious trouble if he was in the torture and interrogation chambers. He knew who the woman was, he wasn't stupid, and being in her playground had him quite nervous, especially if her reputation was true. One thing was for sure though, Naruto really didn't want to find out. Naruto looked up at the expectant look the kunoichi was giving him. My name is Naruto, I am. Before he could continue he was hit in the face once more, this time with enough power that he was sent to the ground. He was about to try and get free before a pair of hands grabbed him and righted him upright in front of the kunoichi. It was then that he realized that there were others in the chamber. Probably some Anbu. To make sure I don't cause any havoc, was his thought process. I'm going to ask you again and please don't lie to me. The kunoichi spoke again. What is your name? This time with each word Naruto was struck. 4 body hits from the kunoichi had him reeling slightly. Although Naruto and Menma were twins, they both had a different body build. Naruto was built like a swimmer, whilst Menma had a bit more muscle development. It was easier to hurt Naruto than it was to hurt Menma. My name is Naruto. Naruto was a little relieved when he didn't get hit. He looked up when he heard a noise and what he saw made his body tremble. In front of him, battered and bruised, was Menma. He had no shirt on and was bleeding from his mouth. His hair was matted and slightly red due to the blood. Naruto was about to shout when he saw the kunoichi punch Menma over and over. Stop it, what the fuck are you doing? Naruto screamed, but to no avail. Naruto kept repeating stop until he blacked out once again. Well, looks like he didn't know it was a genjutsu. The kunoichi spoke to the other figure in the room. The other figure sighed before disappearing from the chamber. A second later Ibiki walked in. He went and collected Naruto and transferred him to another cell, one that was suited for his interrogation. Menma was a little anxious about his test tonight. He really didn't know what to expect, but he knew this was something different. Naruto explained that normally, Kakashi would give his team the bell test. Menma also knew that it required teamwork to pass. He had started reading some of the documents which Naruto showed him but got bored halfway through. The rest was explained by Naruto, especially about the team placements and what team they'd be in. With that thought in mind, he was about to get some lunch when he started shivering. It felt as if something really bad had happened and that he was needed. Naruto, was his first thought, as he started running in a random direction. Naruto on the other hand, slowly opened his eyes only to shiver at the man in front of him. Ibiki smirked. Having that effect on someone often gave him untold pleasure. Naruto on the other hand was afraid. He was very afraid. He knew that he was bound to get caught. He knew that breaking into the Hokage's tower and reading all that was available could get him in trouble. Worse yet was all the secrets that he learned and how he told most of it to Menma. He explained to Menma that death after interrogation was the price for the information. Especially if one was caught. At the thought of Menma, Naruto looked around the room. Menma was nowhere to be found, so Naruto started struggling with the shackles, trying his hardest to get free. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Ibiki spoke, causing Naruto to look him straight in the eyes. You see, people normally use shackles that suppress chakra. Those shackles on the other hand are designed to retransmit your chakra into its elemental designation. Here Naruto could feel the shock from the shackles. The ones you have on send bolts of lightning through your system every time you try and use chakra. There is fire style, ice style, and metal points to name a few, and each one inflicts some form of damage. Naruto couldn't believe his ears. He had quite a large chakra reserve, but his control was phenomenal. This however didn't stop him from being shocked. Now, do you know why you are here? As Ibiki spoke those words, the metal door opened to reveal a shinobi of the Anbu Corp. Entering the room with a person over his shoulder, Ibiki looked at the Anbu member and signed who it was. Ibiki was slightly surprised, although he didn't show it, by the person who was on the Anbu's shoulder. It was none other than Menma. He wondered how the other Uzumaki had found their base of operations and figured he had to cut the game short, or maybe. Well, look who tried to escape. At his words Naruto looked at the person to see his twin brother. He was about to speak before the Anbu tied Menma to a chair using the same material he was locked up with. So, now that we have the pair of you, how about you tell us why you are here? Ibiki started once more as the Anbu member left the room. Naruto was about to answer but stopped when he realized what was happening. He was about to confess all his wrongdoings in the hopes that his brother would get off. He knew about Ibiki and some of his methods, especially his psychological interrogation method. Now Naruto knew why he was here and that he definitely would have been tortured thoroughly had it been for the other reason. Well, at least he hoped that was the case. I think I know why I'm here. Naruto started coughing. The shock to his system and the trauma of what happened recently had dried his mouth and caused an itch in his throat. Am I going to be a part of Anbu? Ibiki looked straight into Naruto's eyes. Ibiki couldn't believe that this young shinobi figured out the test. Normally, shinobi with a heavy conscience would confess to something that they did. Shinobi straight out of the academy often spoke about anything that could be regarded as treason. He was about to answer when three people walked through the door. The first was the young Kunoichi that Naruto had met in his favorite training ground. The second was an Anbu member with long purple hair. The last however slightly scared Naruto. It was none other than the god of shinobi himself, the Sandaime Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen. Congratulations for making it past torture and interrogation. However, you still need a physical and skill assessment, spoke the purple-haired Anbu member. I'm Neko and I will be one of your trainers. Normally you have only one unless you have a certain skill in other areas. Neko spoke once more, looking, from Naruto's perspective, straight at him. However, had your brother interrupted this session, you would have failed your test. How did he know where we were in the first place? The Anbu asked, only for Naruto to shrug his shoulders. Hey brat, don't shrug your shoulders when your superior is talking to you. The purple-haired Kunoichi with the trench coat spoke. Sorry Taicho, I have no idea how he found me, but I think that I have a theory, Naruto spoke, trying his best not to piss off the sadistic Kunoichi. At his words Neko only nodded and remained silent the rest of her time there. That's better. Now I'm Mitarashi Anko. You can call me Anko-sama, Anko-chan or Taicho. I will be helping with your training alongside Neko-chan here. The Anbu didn't react to her nickname. Naruto however looked slightly shocked. He looked to the Hokage for confirmation. The Sandaime nodded once before speaking up. Naruto, they will be training you whilst in Anbu. There will be two others that will train you as well. The Hokage spoke, gaining Naruto's attention. I'll be one of them and I will teach you how to torture and interrogate prisoners, hostages and others. I will train you alongside Anko here. I don't like people slacking off and I have no time for young punks. I was only ordered to train you and if I had it my way, I'd leave you to the wolves. Here Ibiki raised his eyebrows slightly. Anko caught it however. Hey Scarface, who are you calling a wolf? She asked, looking as menacing as she could. The Sandaime however just sighed while telling Anko to quieten down whilst he recommenced talking. Your other sensei will meet you at a later date. He will teach you both tracking, alongside Anko, and infiltration. The Sandaime stated whilst lighting up his pipe. You have passed the first test, the others should be downhill from here, however. Keep in mind that you almost failed and would have found yourself back at the academy. Your superiors here have all acknowledged your strengths and believe that you would make a good Anbu. I believe that you are Anbu material, however, actions prove better than words. Here the Sandaime walked away, leaving Naruto and an unconscious Menma chained up with the shackles. Now, your other tests will be tonight. take your brother and head off home to prepare. Ibiki spoke, slowly removing the shackles from Naruto and then Menma. Neko will be around to help with the where and the when. Menma must not know about you being in Anbu. It could jeopardize both his and your ninja career. Ibiki spoke once more, making sure that Naruto understood the hidden message. With that last thought, Naruto was brought back to the surface by Neko and Anko and taken back to his and Menma's apartment. Naruto didn't know what to think of the situation. He had a feeling that the Sandaime wanted him to spill his guts about his past transgressions. But that would only get both him and his brother in trouble. With that in mind, Naruto put Menma in his bed and had a little rest himself. He wasn't too keen on lying to his brother about him being in Anbu and how Menma came to be home in bed. 30 minutes later, Menma awoke with a start. He looked left and right trying to figure out where he was and how he got here. The last thing he remembered doing was running to an unknown location, where he got knocked out by some Anbu operatives. Before that he was walking to get some Ichiraku ramen when he felt dread. At that thought, Menma bolted out of his room and straight into Naruto's. Naruto was relaxing and felt Menma shift in the room next door. He knew he was going to enter his room and seek out answers. "Aniki, Aniki!" Menma screamed coming through the door. Naruto could see the fear in the eyes of Menma. He knew that Menma felt scared and powerless, even if he was a genin and a shinobi. "Aniki, are you hurt? I felt you get hurt, is everything okay?" Menma started speaking so fast that Naruto could barely hear what he was saying. Naruto got up and hugged his brother trying to calm him down. Naruto was always the level-headed out of the two. Menma always wore his heart on his sleeves, though lately. "Menma, everything is okay. I'm alive. You must have had a bad dream." Menma looked into Naruto's eyes and pulled away slightly. Naruto knew he was caught out, so he started signing to Menma in their secret language. Menma's eyes widened before he picked his brother up screaming, "I knew you could do it." With that, both brothers fell to the floor laughing. Although they were trained in the shinobi arts, they were both just kids at heart. Innocent, if only life could stay that way. "Anyo, what's going to happen now? Do you move out or still stay here?" Menma asked from beside his brother. Naruto thought for a moment before answering. "I'll stay here, but I'll be out most of the time. You will have to start cooking for yourself and read a bit as well. It will be difficult, especially if we have C ranks or higher out of Konoha." Here Naruto looked at Menma only to raise an eyebrow. Menma was slightly rubbing the back of his neck looking away from Naruto. "Aniki, I don't have my test till tonight. It wasn't the belt test like you thought it was." At this Naruto sat up and looked at his brother. He knew that Menma had the skills to become a great shinobi. Naruto in the darkness and Menma in the light. Well, there are other tests that could happen tonight. Normally Kakashi would do the bell test, but things can change. "Where do you meet and what time?" Naruto asked, only to see Menma looking at the ground. He didn't say what time, all he said was that our test was tonight. How am I supposed to know where to meet him and at what time when he didn't state it? Menma fired off, whilst at the same time slightly hyperventilating. Naruto looked at his brother then thought for a minute. "Does either of your teammates know where the test is going to be held?" Menma looked at Naruto with a question mark, trying to determine if they would know. Menma shook his head slowly about to deflate even more before Naruto spoke again. "Well, maybe this is your test." Menma looked at him before going bug-eyed. Naruto was right most of the times, and Menma knew it. "I think I need to find my teammates and see what they think. I'll catch up with you later on, Aniki. I probably won't be home till late." Menma spoke, walking out of Naruto's room and into his own to get ready. Naruto knew that Menma would pass the test. Sakura and Sasuke were both good students at the academy. Problem with that was that this is not the academy anymore and things can change very quickly. As Naruto was pondering on the test further, Menma left the house to find his teammates. When he left, a knock came to the door. Naruto, thinking that Menma forgot his keys, smiled whilst opening the door. Instead of Menma at the door, it was Neko, the purple-haired Anbu. "You are to report to training ground 44 2 hours after dark." She spoke quickly and only loud enough for Naruto to hear. With that, Neko disappeared as quickly as she appeared. Menma didn't know where to look to begin with. He figured that the young Uchiha would be at his large estate, but when he got there, Sasuke was nowhere to be found. He didn't want to waste time with searching the whole compound, so he decided to find Sakura first. The sun was close to setting and he still felt uneasy about the upcoming test. Menma walked out of the Uchiha compound without looking back. He was about to jump on the roof when he caught a glimpse of Sasuke. He looked deep in thought whilst rubbing his hands. Menma could see some bruising on his knuckles and thought that Sasuke must have just finished training. "Sasuke," Menma called out. He started to walk towards him. "What do you want, Dobi?" Sasuke asked, causing a tick mark to appear on Menma's forehead. Before Menma could come up with a viable answer, Sakura came around the corner. She was panting slightly and it looked as if she ran there. "Sasuke-kun, Menma, it's good that the both of you are here. Do either of you know where we are to meet tonight and what time?" The question left Sasuke pondering and Menma shaking his head in the negative. As one, they all thought to ask their sensei. Problem was, they did not know where he would be. "So neither of you know where sensei lives?" Sakura asked, looking between Menma and Sasuke. "We should check the old man, he'd probably know where we are to meet our sensei." Menma spoke, causing Sasuke and Sakura to look in his direction. "Who is the old man?" Sasuke asked in a bored monotone. "The Hokage," Menma replied, looking confused and as if Sasuke did not know the old man. "Menma," Sakura chimed in, "don't call Hokage-sama the old man." She continued, "Show some respect." Menma was about to reply when Sasuke beat him to the punch. "Let's just see if the Hokage can help us," he said before walking in the direction of the Hokage tower. XXX. Menma took the lead and had a huge smile on his face whilst walking through the tower and heading into the Hokage's office. Sasuke and Sakura were following Menma. They did not know why Menma was familiar with the Hokage, and it is something that stuck in their mind during the walk. "Hey old man," Menma called, whilst bursting through the door. Sakura looked shocked and her face went white then to pink in a matter of seconds. Sasuke smirked, but quickly hid it. "Menma, don't be so informal." Sakura snapped. "Sorry Hokage-sama," she continued, before bowing. The old Hokage chuckled and waved a hand, as if saying it was okay. "Ah Menma-kun, what could I do for you?" the Sandaime asked, whilst reaching for his pipe. "We're looking for our sensei. We have our test today, but don't know where the test is supposed to be. That's why we came here to see if you would know?" Menma responded, straight to the point, as per usual. The Hokage looked each genin in the face. He saw that Menma was relaxed with determination shining through his eyes. The young Uchiha pretended that he didn't care, but the Hokage saw a need there, a need and a want for something. Lastly, the aged Hokage looked at Sakura. She looked shy and bashful. Head going down slightly, trying to look away from the Hokage. He could see that she could become great, well the three of them had potential. They just needed to pass the test. "There is one place that he frequents," the Hokage stated, catching even Sakura's attention and gaze. He saw that there was hope in her eyes. "He is often seen at Training Ground 3. Make your way there, and you may find him." Menma wore a big grin as he replied. "Thanks old man, I'll buy you ramen for the information." The Hokage was gobsmacked. His pipe almost fell from his mouth, as his mouth was open. This was the first time he was told that he was going to be getting ramen. Especially coming from the twins. Before he could muster an answer, the three genin was gone. XXX. The three genin felt stupid for not checking the first place that they had met their sensei. It should have been plain and simple, but these things happen. The sun was beginning to set as they arrived at Training Ground 3. The walk there was quiet and reflective, each thinking about the day and what their sensei had said about the heroes of Konoha. Menma felt it at the same time as Sasuke did. They both whirled around in a defensive stance. Sakura was slow to react, but joined her teammates after a second. In front of the three shinobi in training stood a ninja. He was dressed in normal Jonin attire with a Hisha 8 with the Iwagakure symbol. The killer intent rolling off the ninja was enough to make Sakura scared. She had never felt a presence such as this before. She was shaking and was ready to run and hide in fear. Sasuke was faring slightly better than Sakura. Menma on the other hand looked semi-calm. He smiled a huge grin whilst speaking. "So, what is a ninja of your caliber doing here?" This question snapped the tension that was rising in Sakura. Her thoughts moved away from fear and into one of intrigue. Sasuke was still wary, but he was feeling slightly calmed by Menma's words. He knew that the shinobi in front of them was strong and that if it came to it, he and Menma could defend themselves for a while. He was concerned that Sakura would get in the way. The ninja laughed as he threw shuriken at the three genin. Each jumped out of the trajectory, but when Sasuke looked up, he was confronted with a fist flying straight to his head. He got his arms up in the nick of time, minimizing the impact of the blow. Sasuke slid back slightly whilst trying to recover. He looked up and saw that Menma sending a kick to the shinobi's head. The shinobi ducked under the kick and was about to send Menma flying with an uppercut, before he felt the need to jump back. Sasuke saw that a kunai was going directly at the shinobi's body. The retreat of the Iwa shinobi gave Sasuke enough time to check who had thrown the kunai. He was slightly surprised when he saw another Menma standing in an outreached position, with his hand extended. The other Menma disappeared in a puff of smoke. Before Sasuke could utter a word, the smoke cleared and he saw that Menma was going on the offensive. Sasuke looked for their last teammate, and saw her standing with tear-filled eyes. Sakura was scared, she had no idea what was happening and did not know how to react. Sasuke was brought out of his thoughts when he saw Menma flying towards him. It took him a split second, but Sasuke moved to the side and started hand signals in quick succession. Fire release, Great Fireball Jutsu. Sasuke spoke as a huge ball of flame shot toward the Iwa nin. He thought that it had hit, but was surprised when he noticed that the nin was gone. He started looking around. Left, right, up, down, came the voice of the Iwa nin. Earth release, Double Suicide Decapitation Jutsu. Before Sasuke knew what was happening, he found himself unable to move, with his body stuck in the ground. Sasuke looked up once more to see the Iwa nin emerge with a kunai in hand. Sasuke knew he was in serious trouble. The kunai was on its descent to his throat when he heard Sakura scream. She was rooted to the spot and horrified. Sasuke looked at her, then looked around for Menma. He knew that Menma shouldn't be down this long. As if conjured by his thoughts, Menma was in front of Sasuke, fending the killing blow of the Iwa nin. Another Menma was standing by Sakura, and a third pulled Sasuke free. Sasuke had no idea how he got free, but was thankful nonetheless. With that in mind, Sasuke closed his eyes. Opening it, he saw the world slightly different. Menma smiled whilst looking at Sasuke. He knew just how strong those eyes were. The Menma next to Sakura disappeared and she started throwing shuriken at the Iwa nin. The Iwa nin jumped back once more. Sasuke was keeping a close eye on the Iwa nin, watching his every move. The Iwa nin looked as if he was going to attack Sasuke and Menma again. He sprinted at full speed at them, whilst pulling out some shuriken in his left hand, a kunai in his right. The shuriken he threw at Sasuke and Menma in an arching motion. 4 went straight for Menma and Sasuke whilst 2 went straight for Sakura. Sakura was expecting this, as it was exactly as Menma predicted. The shuriken went straight through Sakura and hit the tree behind her. This caught the Iwa nin by surprise as he was running straight at Sasuke and Menma. Sasuke and Menma both threw their own shuriken to counteract the shuriken that the Iwa nin threw. At the same time, Menma ran straight at the nin whilst Sasuke went through the same hand signs as before. The split-second loss of concentration was all it took for the tables to turn. The Menma in front of the Iwa nin disappeared and a huge fireball was headed his way. The Iwa nin attempted to jump to the right, only to be forced to retreat as shuriken came flying towards him. He thought he was in the clear, until he felt a hit to his temple. That was the last thing he felt, before everything went dark. Kakashi was smiling from the bushes. He saw that his team had worked together to take down a shinobi who was a class above them. He also got a better understanding on the strengths and weaknesses of each genin. Sakura was, at best, a backup fighter. She had no confidence in wanting to get into the fray. She also needed some physical training. Sasuke had unlocked his Sharingan, but Kakashi saw that it was not fully developed. He also saw that Sasuke had all of one fire jutsu in his arsenal. He also saw that Sasuke had good control over his chakra network. Kakashi was slightly surprised by Menma. He knew that the twins were good, but he didn't think that they would be that good. Menma was almost good enough to stick with the Iwa nin one-on-one. With these thoughts to himself, he disappeared and reappeared in front of the team. Congratulations on passing your test. The 3 genin were slightly surprised by Kakashi's sudden appearance, and even more so with the newfound revelation. Sakura screamed at the same time as Menma. Sasuke on the other hand just smirked. So, Kakashi continued, why did you not kill the Iwa nin? Here, the genin looked at each other, uncertain as to what should be said. He is an enemy trespassing in Konoha. Do you at least know what he was doing here? Kakashi asked, causing each genin to wonder what was going on. But I thought this was a test? Sakura asked whilst looking at Menma for confirmation. Kakashi followed her gaze and looked expectantly at Menma. I figured that it was a test, with a clone or something? Menma explained. Kakashi looked at Sasuke next. I knew it wasn't a clone, but I too thought it a coincidental inconvenience when he appeared in the exact same place as we were meant to meet you. Sasuke explained. Yes, it was a test. Kakashi assured the genin, much to their relieved faces. However, he is still an enemy trespassing in Konoha. What should be done with him? Here the genin did not know what to say. They understood what Kakashi meant, or they thought they did. I want you to kill him. Each genin had a different reaction. Sakura had a look of pure fear. She did not want to take a life and could not comprehend that her sensei wanted that of her. She knew that, theoretically, to be a shinobi, she had to kill others, but she thought that this would only happen when she was older, or a chunin. Menma had a slightly worried look. He didn't know if this was a part of the test or something entirely different. If only Naruto were here. He could give Menma an idea of what was going on here. Sasuke had a blank stare. It was as if all emotion had drained from his face at the mention of killing the enemy. Kakashi was keeping his keen eye on them all, wondering what they will do. There are 3 of us, and only one enemy, Sasuke said, causing Sakura and Menma to sigh in relief. They certainly believed that it was just a test after all. At that, 2 more Kakashis appeared in the area. Both had bodies flung over their shoulders. The clones dropped the bodies in front of Kakashi and disappeared in a puff of smoke. Sakura lost all color from her face. Her mouth was opened slightly and she looked like she wanted to be anywhere but there. Menma was almost on the same page as Sakura. He felt that this was wrong and that there should be another way that this could be handled. Sasuke lost a bit of his calm composure and Kakashi could see the concern in his eyes. This is what Kakashi expected from fresh out of the academy genin. Gone was the false bravado of Menma. Gone was the foolish love-struck fangirl in Sakura. Gone was the know-it-all avenger in Sasuke. All that remained were uncertain, scared genin. Kakashi was about to speak again when Sasuke pulled out his kunai and started walking towards one of the Iwa nin. Menma jumped in front of Sasuke screaming, "What do you think you're doing? You don't kill a nin who is unconscious and cannot defend himself. What do you want, to kill a nin while he is conscious and able to feel the pain that he is in? To be a hero? Is that what you think being a shinobi means?" Sasuke asked. "This is no game, this is reality. I think Menma is right." Sakura spoke, feeling scared, but willing to voice her opinion. "We don't have to do this, right, sensei?" Menma asked, looking in the direction of Kakashi. He was disappointed, however, as he saw that Kakashi was no longer with them. "The choice is up to us?" Sasuke said, taking another step forward. Menma was about to speak again, before they heard Sakura scream. Sasuke and Menma looked over to see the Iwa nin they fought, holding a kunai to Sakura's neck. They were both at a loss for words. Their inaction had caused their teammate to be captured. They were about to negotiate, before they heard their sensei's voice. "It looks like I was wrong in passing the 3 of you. If Sakura dies, you all fail. Don't worry about going back to the academy, you'll have to give up on becoming a shinobi altogether." As Kakashi was speaking, the Iwa nin was looking around for him, wondering where his voice was coming from. As Kakashi finished speaking, the Iwa nin looked back at Menma and Sasuke. At that time he dropped the kunai as one was embedded into his skull. Sakura tried to speak, but was at a loss for words. Looking at the outstretched arm, she couldn't believe who had saved her life. With tears streaming down his cheek, Menma had acted without a second thought. He saw that their opponent was distracted and remembered Naruto's words. "Take every advantage that you can get." Now he understood what that meant. Sakura plopped to her knees as Sasuke looked from the Iwa nin to Menma. At that moment, one of the other nin awoke and took a direct path straight for Sakura. Sakura looked up in time to see the nin drop dead in front of her. This time by the hand of Sasuke. Both her teammates had just saved her life and taken one to do so. She was still scared, and with tears streaming down her face, she approached the other nin, pulled out her kunai, and stabbed him through the neck. She tried to close her eyes, but found it very difficult to do so. As the kunai pierced the flesh, the nin opened his eyes in shock and looked long and deeply into Sakura's own. She saw it, the fear, the pain, the confusion. She also saw the light fade from her eyes. Congratulations, you have all passed your test. You are now fully fledged shinobi. Kakashi spoke, appearing in front of the genin. Go home and rest tonight, for tomorrow, the real training starts. He said, before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Sakura walked away with her head down. She was going home, and possibly never returning. Sasuke looked at her, then at Menma. He was feeling relieved that he had become a full-fledged shinobi, as it was one more step towards avenging his family. But he still felt hollow. Menma walked away at the same time that Sakura did. Head was down while tears were threatening to fall once more. Sasuke stood for a second more, looking in the direction of each of his teammates before heading home. He would do some training before going to bed. Kakashi looked on in silence. He saw how each of his students had acted and now he had a better understanding of their psyche. He decided to have a shadow clone follow Sakura and Menma. But Sasuke he wanted to follow himself. Menma arrived home to an empty house. It was just after dusk, and the sun's light was quickly fading. Menma wanted to speak to Naruto, but found he wasn't home. This only caused some form of loneliness in his being. He wanted reassurance, and Naruto was the one whom comforts him. Menma walked into his room, curled into a ball and cried himself to sleep. Naruto arrived at training ground 44 an hour after the sun had set. He had stopped by Ichiraku for a light meal, seeing as he still had time on his hands. He wouldn't normally go to Ichiraku without Menma, but he felt the need for something to eat. Well, look who's early. Anko exclaimed, looking at Naruto with a predatory grin. Naruto was knocked out of his thoughts with the remark. I thought you said 2 hours after dark? Naruto responded. He had purposely arrived an hour after to get the lay of the land. He knew bits and pieces about training ground 44, better known as the Forest of Death. He knew there was 44 entrances, so he needed to figure out which one he would need to attend. Yes, that is true, Anko replied, snapping Naruto from his thoughts. I expected you to arrive early. It is something that you like doing. Anko smirked, dropping from the branch she was standing on and walking towards Naruto. Oh great, it looks like I have a stalker. Naruto thought to himself. Anko stood directly in front of him. So how long have you been spying on me? Naruto asked, catching Anko slightly off guard. She hid it well with that dangerous smirk of hers. Naruto missed the look entirely and had mistaken it for crazy. Why would I spy on a brat like you? Anko asked, smirk still evident on her face. Time for Naruto to take it up a notch. Well, I do recall seeing you a few times. He lied. He felt, as opposed to see. I mean, if you want someone to scratch an itch, I'd gladly oblige. He said, whilst slowly smirking. Naruto's smirk faded as soon as he felt a hard hit to his face. He was on the ground gazing up at the stars. He knew in that instant that he had overstepped the boundary. He couldn't believe how foolish he was. This is something he expected from Menma, but Naruto himself felt that he was mature than his twin brother. Sorry if I... Naruto started, trying to get up. He had stopped when he felt the kunai pressed to his throat. Looking up he saw the mask crack a little, before the evil smirk appeared on Anko's face once more. If you ever say anything like that again, you'll be wearing a grand smile. Anko stated, putting her unused finger to her throat and dragging it across. Naruto nodded his head very slowly, trying not to elicit any more anger from his superior. Anko stood and leapt to the tree. Sitting on the branch, she started feasting on her favorite food, dango. Naruto got up slowly, wondering what that was all about. He could see that he had offended the Tokubetsu Jonin. He just didn't understand how. With that thought in mind, he took off in a run, back to village. Anko didn't even gaze at her apprentice. She was still thinking, thoughts reeling in her mind. Smart-assed little shit, just like all the other fools in this village. She thought, trying her hardest to forget the ordeal and enjoy her meal. She was always intrigued by the twins. At first she hated getting the assignments from the Hokage to babysit them. But she found them very interesting as the years went by. She even gave them hints that she was spying, just to see what they would do, and to her surprise, they did not let her down. She saw the strength each of them had and marveled at their genius. When she let them know she was watching, they stopped training to their full extent, and pretended that they were average at best. Truth was, they could have graduated from the academy the year they first entered. That just shows how good they are. Now she was regretting her decision. She was the first to ask if both boys, well maybe not both, could become a part of the Anbu Corp. She even asked to train them herself. But the Hokage stated that they needed balance in the teams and that Naruto had the potential for Anbu, but Menma wouldn't make it. The Hokage also stated that she couldn't take on an apprentice, because she was not but a Tokubetsu Jonin, not a master. Hence the reason for Naruto having more than one sensei. It was slightly unorthodox but not unusual. This was the first time that 4 masters had one student. This was to evenly distribute the load amongst Anko and her peers. HMPH, let the others train the little shit. Don't think he'll be available much. She brooded once more. At that, Naruto wandered back into the clearing. Anko could see that he had something in his hands. The smell of it wafted to her nose, and she glared daggers at Naruto. Seeing the look, he slowly made his way towards his superior. Stopping at the base of the tree, he started speaking. "I'm sorry if I offended you," he exclaimed, offering her the bag of dango. She snatched it up, keeping a wary eye on Naruto. This was too nice for a shinobi. It almost felt like one of their pranks. Naruto saw the look and felt even worse. He didn't mean to upset one of his senseis, but he saw it. For a split second, he saw the hurt in her eyes. Anko took one out, and started examining it. She was skeptical of this whole charade. Taking a bite, she kept her eyes on Naruto, still thinking this was a prank. As no prank was deployed, she continued munching on the goodies. "HMPH brat," she exclaimed, ignoring Naruto completely as she started demolishing the treats. Naruto exhaled. He didn't know that he was holding his breath. He still felt bad for what he had caused. He didn't think she deserved this. With that thought in mind, he put his back towards the base of the tree Anko was in, and slid to the ground. He waited in that position till the rest of his superiors arrived. "Your mission is simple," Neko exclaimed, looking at Naruto. The rest of his superiors had arrived just before 2 hours after the sun set. The only member missing was the nin Naruto hadn't met. He was still on an assignment. "Hey brat, you listening?" Anko exclaimed, whacking Naruto in the back of the head with an open palm. He felt that this was going to be a usual occurrence. "Thank you Anko," Neko continued. "As I was saying, your mission is simple. In the Forest of Death are 10 shinobi. You have to track each one." Here Naruto smirked slightly, and kill them. The smirk dropped off Naruto's face just as quick as it had appeared. His face slightly paled at this revelation. "That is all you have to do to complete your mission," Neko ended, looking Naruto, from his perspective, straight in the eye. "So all I have to do is track down these 10 shinobi and kill them, what's the catch?" Naruto asked. He saw the look that Neko was giving Anko. Anko had stood by Naruto since Neko started talking. Neko was at the front, instructing Naruto on what to do, and Ibiki stood to the side, minding his own business. The shinobi are from Konoha's prison. They have each claimed the life of more than 3 Konoha citizens. They have each been interrogated and sent to the cells. They was told that if they killed the blank-faced Anbu, they would be set free. Here Neko showed Naruto his Anbu mask. It was blank, no design could be found on it at all. "You ready for this brat?" Anko asked, smirking from her position. "What if I fail?" Naruto asked. He still did not feel comfortable. "There is only one way you failed this assignment, death." Ibiki chimed in, speaking for the first time tonight. "Hey Scarface, don't go scaring our protege," Anko exclaimed. This confused Naruto even more. It was as if Anko wanted him to pass, but how? He was sure that he was on her bad side. "When do I start?" Naruto asked, all attention focused on him once more. "Whenever you are ready to, start. You are to meet us back here when you are finished." Neko responded to Naruto's question. Now Naruto was really scared. He had to go into the Forest of Death, at night, alone, and track and kill 10 shinobi. With that in mind, Naruto ran through the gate. "How do you think he'll fare?" Ibiki asked, looking after the entrance that Naruto used. "HMPH, brat thinks he can do this foolishness. He should have prepared himself better. He might not make it out." Anko replied. She wanted him to make it though, just to see how he could surprise them. "He'll make it, I just wonder what mask he'll come out with," Neko exclaimed. Every Anbu went through the same process. Killing shinobi in the forest of death. If they succeeded, they would return to the gate that they entered. When they walked past, their mask would warp into what their codenames would be. This was always the process of getting new Anbu. Only those whom are skilled could pass. Naruto ran for 5 minutes without stopping. He was slightly afraid, but knew that he couldn't fail. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto exclaimed, while summoning 20 clones. These clones would break off in pairs, the first becoming the target, decoy, and the second landing the killing blow. Each clone jumped off and completed their task. Naruto sat on the ground, legs crossed, waiting for the good news. He knew that this could easily take all night, but he wanted to get this over and done with as soon as possible. Little did he know that he was also being watched. Naruto walked out of the same gate that he entered. It was almost sunrise, and the pre-dawn glow had brightened the sky. He was surprised to see his 3 senseis waiting for him. Ibiki wore a smirk, Neiko was standing with her arms crossed and Anko sitting on the tree branch once more. She jumped off and joined her peers in front of Naruto. She wore the biggest smirk of them all. Pay up, she exclaimed, putting her hands out in front of Neiko and Ibiki. They both conceded and handed Anko a wad of Ryo. Naruto was confused. Had they bet on if he would make it or what? Welcome back, from this day forth you will be known as Fox. No other Anbu knows your identity, keep it that way. Neiko exclaimed. Naruto was confused, they had already chosen his codename, and it was one that he hated. Now, Anko will take you to the Anbu hospice. You're to recover from your wounds and meet tonight at the Hokage's tower. She will also take you to your new living quarters. With her part done, Neiko disappeared from the site. Naruto was confused, he had to live in his own quarters, that didn't sound good at all. Seeing his face, Anko reassured him. Relax, those quarters are for your Anbu gear and anything that you don't want to leave at home. You can still live with your brother. At that revelation Naruto smiled, a true smile, and fainted. Anko caught him before he could hit the ground. Got himself injured, looks like a giant cat's claw. Ibiki exclaimed, disappearing as well and leaving Anko with Fox. Brad did well. It normally takes longer for Anbu to pass this test. Anko stated, whilst disappearing with Fox in her arms. First stop, the hospice. Menma slowly opened his eyes. He knew he was in his room, but had no recollection of how he got there. He got up slowly, feeling sluggish in his movements, and went to the bathroom. He completed his morning ablutions and searched for his twin brother. Popping his head through the door, Menma found that Naruto's bed was empty, he was nowhere to be found. Naruto was gone and Menma felt more alone than ever. Naruto had always been there for him, and now he felt abandoned. He wanted to tell Naruto of his nightmare. He had dreamt that he had protected his teammates by taking a life. It felt as real to him as his own 2 hands, yet he felt that it was only a dream. He took a deep breath to calm his nerves. Time for breakfast, he spoke aloud to himself. As if speaking would break the illusion of his fear. With no other thought but breakfast, Menma was about to take off to his favorite bar. He knew that it may not be open, but he badly needed to get out of the house. Just as he was about to leave, he heard a knock on the door. Menma looked through it to find his teammates standing there. Hi, how did you know where I live? Menma asked, looking slightly confused. Can we come in? Sakura asked, voice just above a whisper. Yeah sure, Menma responded, wearing a huge grin on his face. Sasuke was slightly peeved looking at his teammate with that grin. Did yesterday feel like a dream to you too? Sakura asked quietly, after taking a seat on the couch in the lounge. Sasuke stood at the entrance connecting the lounge, dining area to the kitchen. His arms were crossed and his bangs were covering his eyes. What are you talking about? What happened yesterday? Menma asked, looking genuinely confused. With that, Sasuke left, not bothering with wasting his time on his foolish teammate. He had better things to do, like training. Menma, I'm talking about our test yesterday afternoon. Sakura continued with a soft voice. She saw Sasuke leave, but wanted clarification. It felt like a genjutsu, it must not have been real. Here Sakura looked into the eyes of Menma, pleading with him to tell her that it was a genjutsu. Menma only looked more confused. What are you talking about? I mean I had a dream last night, but it wasn't anything to do with the test was it? Menma asked, showing his confusion once more. We took a life. Sakura all but screamed. It had been building, but she didn't think she would let the bubble burst. She put her head in her hands and started shaking uncontrollably. Sobs racking her body. Unbeknownst to Sakura and Menma, Sasuke was at the window, looking in on the scene. He felt slightly horrified with what he did yesterday, but to see Menma acting as if nothing happened, it really got to Sasuke. Sakura, bawling her eyes out, that he could understand. But no reaction from Menma, that Sasuke couldn't believe. Menma's mouth was open, his eyes vacant, no words coming from his being. Sakura continued to sob, only looking up when she heard a large thump. Menma was lying on the ground, seeming to have passed out. Sasuke climbed through the window, after witnessing his teammate faint. What happened? Sakura asked, her thoughts focusing solely on the well-being of her teammate. I don't know. He just fainted. Sasuke responded, checking to see if Menma was still alive. We should take him to the hospital. Sakura stated, knocking Sasuke from his thoughts. Anko entered the hospice, expecting to see Naruto still asleep. Instead she found an empty ruffled bed. The fox mask was lying on the small bench, next to the bed. There was no other sign of Naruto. Little brat. Took off before being discharged. Anko vented, before calming her nerves. She knew where he was going, best to meet him there. Naruto entered his and Menma's apartment. He had just awoken from the Anbu hospice with a strong feeling of extreme pain. This pain was from fear, a deep probing fear that knew no depth. He knew that it was Menma, their connection was strongest when strong emotions were involved. Naruto had quickly got dressed and ran straight to the apartment. Arriving, he heard Sakura and Sasuke talking. He came into the scene of his brother lying unconscious on the floor, Sasuke checking his vital signs and Sakura wiping tears from her eyes. What happened? Naruto asked, scaring the life out of Sakura, and causing Sasuke to spin and ready himself in a defensive stance. They didn't hear Naruto enter and both were slightly scared by his sneaking prowess. We don't know. 1 minute he was standing there, the next he dropped to the floor. Sasuke stated, keeping his voice neutral. Naruto. Menma stated, waking from his unconscious state, and looking directly at his brother. I took a life. He stated, before tears started running down his face. Naruto was shocked. He came forward and comforted his brother, by embracing him in a hug. I took a life, Naruto. Menma kept repeating over and over. Sakura sat on the couch at the mention of the life being taken, and put her head on her palms once more. It's okay, it was only a nightmare. You are fine, Naruto stated, trying to calm his brother. At this point, Sasuke stood back in his original position, brooding once more. Now he was confused. Menma thought that it was a dream, that's why he felt like he hadn't taken a life. It really happened. Sasuke chimed in, head down once more, with his bangs covering his eyes. We really did take a life. Here Naruto looked at Sasuke and then at Sakura. This was a gamble, but he tried anyway, hoping his brother was mature enough to understand. What happened? Explain it to me. Naruto gently prodded Menma. They were both sitting on the floor, arms around each other. Sasuke was slightly jealous at the closeness of the twins. He didn't have that type of affection with anyone. Sakura was still sobbing on the couch, no coherent thought going through her mind. WET took a L life. To PP pass the TS test, we had to KK kill. Menma spoke up, eyes streaming with tears. At that revelation, Naruto looked out the window, his thoughts going back to what he knew of Konoha and how different this test was compared to the normal belt test that Kakashi used to test his genin. ITH thought it was a D dream. ANN nightmare. L like you normally as say. Menma stated, looking hopefully into Naruto's eyes. At that face, Naruto's mask slipped. Menma saw, in that instant, the truth. Naruto had always said that the bad things that had happened to the twins were a nightmare that Menma concocted when he was asleep. Now however, Menma felt it was real. So all the N nightmares were true? Menma asked, fearing the answer. At this question, Sakura stopped sobbing, she wanted to know what the twins were talking about. Sasuke stopped his brooding to see what the deal was. Yes, Naruto stated, looking Menma in the eye. The orphanage? Menma asked. Yes, Naruto responded. That time you killed the man for trying to hurt me? Yes, Naruto replied. The girl who picked on you? Yes, Naruto stated once more. 20 or so statements came from Menma's mouth, with the answer always being yes. Each yes was softer than the last, until Naruto was whispering. Sakura and Sasuke saw at that moment how far Naruto went to protect his brother. The fox? Menma asked. At this Naruto shook his head in the positive, too afraid to use his voice. Sasuke and Sakura were confused with that last detail. What fox was at the forefront of their minds? At that last answer, Menma got up and walked into his room, softly closing the door and locking it behind him. Naruto could feel the deep embedded sorrow that Menma had. He could also feel the slight betrayal that he had towards Naruto. Something which hurt him more than anything. Team 7 and Naruto did not know they were being watched. Outside the window were Kakashi, and to his left stood Anko. Each looking at the scene with straight faces, neither giving any indication of what they were feeling at this point in time. They each heard the last question that Menma asked, and knew what the twins were referring to. They both saw Naruto stand, walk out the front door and disappear. Anko took off first, following her apprentice to the Hokage's tower. Kakashi left 3 clones in his wake, and followed after Anko. He wanted to know what Naruto was thinking. Naruto arrived at the Hokage's tower pissed. Normally he would be thinking clearly, but the mixed emotions of the past 2 days were getting to him. He stormed into the Hokage's office, without any sense of subtlety. Hokage-sama, Naruto stated, standing in front of his fearless leader. The Hokage had observed the scene between Naruto and Menma with his crystal ball. He had been keeping a close eye on all the genin that passed their exams yesterday, knowing that the bonds they develop with their teammates are crucial. This is what could make or break a team. The Hokage saw Naruto leave, and felt him heading in his direction. Normally the Hokage wouldn't be able to pinpoint Naruto, due to his skills at stealth, but it seems as if Naruto was letting his emotions cloud his mind. This was the first time he actually saw Naruto full of rage. "Ah, Naruto-kun, glad to see you on your feet. How can I help you?" the Hokage asked, feigning ignorance and pretending this was a friendly visit. The Hokage could feel the cold rage boiling over Naruto, and needed a way to defuse the situation. "Where is Kakashi?" Naruto asked. The Hokage was slightly taken aback with the question. "I want to have a chat with him." Naruto knew he was fighting way above his belt in this match, but he really needed to vent his anger. "I'm here," Kakashi stated, poofing into existence in the room. He stood in his relaxed state, next to the Hokage's desk, facing Naruto's direction. He had his book in hand and was acting aloof. Anko appeared in the room a second later, standing directly behind Naruto. "What did you do to my brother?" he asked, only to get a bored look from Kakashi. At the look, Naruto slowly started reaching for his kunai. Kakashi saw the movement, but didn't bother acknowledging it as a threat. "What do you mean?" Kakashi asked. Naruto found his kunai and was about to fling it at Kakashi's head, but a hand on his shoulder stopped his movements completely. He had barely felt the presence of Anko behind him. Why was he assigned with a task to kill instead of your original bell test? Naruto asked, hand still resting on kunai. It seems that knowledge of the bell test was leaked to the outside, so I needed some other way to test them. Kakashi explained, answering Naruto's question. "But I don't see how my soldiers are of any of you concerned genin." Kakashi continued, adding venom to the word genin. "I'm not a genin, I'm a Naruto." The Hokage warned, stopping Naruto from completing that sentence. Naruto looked between the Hokage and Kakashi. He saw at that instant that he was out of his depth. He wouldn't get any answers from these two shinobi. "A final warning then, Inu-san," Naruto responded, catching Kakashi, the Hokage and Anko off guard. "If Menma doesn't recover from this lapse, you will have hell to pay," Naruto concluded, looking Kakashi in his lone eye. "Is that a threat?" Kakashi asked, putting his book away and standing in a ready stance. "Careful, Scarecrow," Anko chimed in. "Anyone would think you wanted a fight?" She continued, smirking slightly and revealing the kunai in her hand. "HMPH. Still wouldn't make a decent fight, even if 2 against 1. Kakashi stated, before getting his book out once more. "They are my soldiers, Naruto, and I test them however I see fit." At that, Kakashi disappeared the same way he appeared, in a poof of smoke. Naruto had felt the killing intent rolling off of Kakashi when he put his book away. He saw at that moment, how far out of his league Kakashi was. He was thankful that Anko had his back, yet he didn't understand why. "Now Naruto-kun," The Hokage stated, gaining Naruto and Anko's attention. It seems you haven't fully recovered from your injuries. At this, the Hokage pointed to Naruto's shirt. Blood was slowly showing its way through, even if the color of the shirt was dark. Naruto looked down at his shirt, then looked back at the Hokage. One final question to sat his anger. Why has Konoha reverted back to an age where it seems as if violence and war is on the horizon? Naruto asked. The Hokage smirked. Now he knew that Naruto had more knowledge than he let on. Peace is not forever and war is inevitable. The will of fire has guided us through the dark ages, it shall do so once again. The Hokage stated, as if what he said answered Naruto's question. Now there is a lot of paperwork that I have to do, please see yourself out. The Hokage concluded, ignoring Naruto and returning to his paperwork. Naruto left through the door he entered, Anko on his trail. Hey brat, Anko said, catching Naruto's attention. This is yours. Here Anko handed him a mask. The mask was in the shape of a fox with some color dabbed here and there. Don't ever lose it again. When did I get a new mask? Naruto asked, causing Anko to laugh in his face. Who said it's new? She stated, laughing again, whilst leading Naruto out of the Hokage's tower. Naruto was confused with the answer, and left it at that. Anyo senpai. Naruto spoke in a very soft voice. Thank you for backing me up in there. He finished, looking away slightly, feeling ashamed that he might be rejected. Hey brat, don't dwell on it. She responded. But he's right, you know. Anko continued after some silence. They're his soldiers, and he'd do anything to protect them. Just like I'll do anything to protect you. Anko finished. This statement rocked Naruto to his core, and he felt that he was about to cry. Anko, feeling the mood swing in her student, laughed. Come brat, back to the hospice for you. With that, they both disappeared in a swirl of leaves. The moment Naruto left the apartment, Sakura and Sasuke looked slightly lost. Sakura was still on the couch, staring at the blank space in front of her, whilst Sasuke still had his back to the wall, hands in pocket, face brooding. Sakura got up and made her way towards Menma's room. She softly knocked on the door. Menma-kun, are you alright? She asked through the door. Sasuke was surprised by the question and didn't know how Menma would answer. Can we come in? Sakura continued. At this question, the door unlocked and opened. Sakura made her way through the door. Sasuke stood alone for a minute longer, before following Sakura into Menma's room. Sasuke saw Menma at the top of his bed, head on his knees, with his arms wrapped around them and his back leaning against the wall. Sakura stood to his side in contemplation, wondering if she should touch him or not. Sasuke walked in and sat at the foot end of the bed. You know this is pathetic, don't you? Sasuke asked, trying to get Menma to look up so he can see his face. Menma's shoulders stiffened at Sasuke's voice. Sakura was going to reprimand him, but Sasuke continued speaking. We were raised in times of peace, yet we found ourselves in situations that would contradict that term. What you said out there, those nightmares you had, they didn't make you weak, did they? They made you strong. Here Menma slowly looked up, meeting Sasuke's eyes for the first time. Sasuke smirked and continued, you are one of the strongest genin in this village, so am I and your brother. Sasuke and Sakura assumed that Naruto was a genin as they didn't know his status as an Anbu operative. Sakura had a downtrodden face at hearing Sasuke's words. She wasn't anywhere near their level of expertise. Sakura is one of the brightest genin in the village. Sasuke continued, seeing the broken look Sakura had, and hoping to somehow make amends. She looked in Sasuke's direction, a blush creeping across her face. Yes, we took a life yesterday, but that was to prepare us for a life as shinobi. Sasuke stated, knowing that he had the attention of both Sakura and Menma. We can get stronger together. He continued, I have to get stronger to kill my brother. Sasuke stated, eyes flashing from Onyx to Sharingan, then back again. The brother who killed my whole family, and left me to be the last Uchiha. Menma nodded slowly, but Sakura was shocked. She did not know this fact about Sasuke. Now I cannot do that without help. And the only people I can trust are those around me. That consists of 3 people, 2 are in this room. Sakura's head dropped slightly. She was thinking of ways that she could help, nothing actually sprung to mind. Now I don't know if he'll keep his word, but if this sensei of ours is going to make us great, then I say we give it a shot. What is there to lose? Sasuke asked at the end, voice dropping. Menma smiled. A true smile, the likes of which Sakura and Sasuke had never seen. Sakura smiled in response to what Sasuke said and in response to Menma. Sasuke smirked once more before standing. How about some training? He intoned, gaining the attention of Menma and Sakura. A silent consensus was reached that day, a forging of friendships, the likes which had never been seen. It had been over a month since Menma became a fully fledged shinobi. He had spent most of his time with his teammates, either training or completing missions. He was out at sunrise and home after dark, each day every day. He hadn't seen or spoken to Naruto since the day after taking his first life. A part of him wanted to go to his brother and fix the broken bond, but he felt that distance was probably for the best. Besides, his team was one of the best genin cell in Konoha. He knew this as a fact, as he, Sakura and Sasuke had challenged the other teams to constant contests. These contests were based on Kakashi's rivalry contest with one of the Jonin senseis, Guy. Team 7 had demolished the other two genin teams. They hadn't gone against Team Guy, but they were content with claims of being number 1. Kakashi had also taught them some of the skills needed to survive. They learned to track, set up traps, which Menma excelled in, and how to gather, hunt, kill, skin and prepare food. They also learned how to water walk, and climb trees using chakra, though Menma already knew these as well. These skills contributed to their overall abilities. Kakashi even taught them a jutsu each that they were to practice. This was after finding out what their affinity to chakra was. Sasuke had a split affinity between fire and lightning, making him a strong offensive type shinobi. Sakura had a split between earth and water whilst Menma had an affinity for wind, but Kakashi could feel that Menma had an affinity for yang release as well. Something which manifested itself in the way Menma lived. He knew that this would be advanced, so he didn't bother explaining this to them yet, knowing full well that the three of them could become a competent genin cell. So instead, Kakashi tried to teach them genjutsu. Menma, however, wasn't able to complete this part of the training. This wasn't much of a problem, as Kakashi assumed this to be the case. He also taught them how to disrupt a genjutsu, something that might save their lives in the future. Team 7 were making their way to the Hokage Tower, after capturing their target and accomplishing another task. Menma was grumbling that the tasks they were assigned were too easy and that he wanted something challenging. Sasuke smirked, showing that he agreed, and Sakura nodded her head up and down. Nay, Kakashi-sensei, why can't we do a higher mission, something that would at least get us out of Konoha and explore the world? At Menma's outburst, Kakashi laughed. I don't know, you still haven't beaten me in a spar yet, and until you do, you may have to remain in Konoha forever. Here Kakashi smirked, whilst going through his favorite book. Sasuke and Sakura were quietly observing the conversation. They both wanted out of Konoha for a while, and this cat that they had captured only added to their dislike of D-rank missions. Arriving at the tower, Team 7 walked in to get another mission from the Hokage. Naruto had also been kept busy over the past month. He knew that things were still shaky between him and his twin, but he sincerely believed that Menma would seek him out and try to mend those bridges. As each day passed, however, Naruto felt as if their connection was slowly slipping. They could still feel what the other was doing, and their emotions often played out through the other's minds. Naruto had learned to mask his emotions well, to ensure that he became a truly magnificent Anbu operative. He had mastered many skills over the month, and met his fourth sensei. Most of the time he spent with Anko. Naruto regarded her and called her sensei as opposed to senpai. She was his main sensei, and the others were backups. He had spent more time in the Forest of Death, getting the lay of the land and harnessing his skills. Naruto had found that his chakra affinity was wind but asked his sensei about yin and yang release. He always had a creative mind. Many of the pranks that the twins came up with were directly from Naruto's arsenal. He thought quite a few steps ahead, to ensure everything went off without a hitch. Anko had explained that he might indeed have yin release as another affinity. This confused her, and Naruto understood why. It was believed that he and Menma both had the nine-tailed demon fox sealed within them. Issue was, they didn't know much about it. Menma often visited the fox in his seal and spoke to him on occasion. These, Naruto stated, were dreams that Menma made up. Of course, Naruto knew the truth. He and Menma were Jinchuriki. This, he had kept from Menma, until that fateful day. "Hey brat, we got another assignment from the Hokage," Anko stated, disrupting Naruto from his thoughts. "Hi sensei," Naruto responded. Anko saw the image of Naruto disappear in front of her eyes, as if blown away by the wind. Haha, Anko laughed. "So you finally did it. Now you know that you can make after images. It's like I told you, you have a knack for genjutsu." Anko intoned, impressed with the progress that Naruto made. "I never actually thought that I had an affinity with genjutsu because of, well you know, but maybe this is meant to be. Genjutsu suits me more than ninjutsu," Naruto concluded, reappearing in front of Anko. "I'll have to take you to Konoha's genjutsu mistress, hopefully she'll teach you a thing or two," Anko stated, before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. What Naruto didn't tell her, was that he already knew he had an affinity to genjutsu. He was only playing the role of student, to ensure no suspicion would arise in his team members, or the Hokage for that matter. Naruto followed Anko a second after the thought passed. They both wound up in the Hokage's office. Naruto was fully masked in his Anbu gear, while Anko remained the same in her large trench coat, fishnet coverings, and orangey, brown skirt. Naruto still disliked the Hokage. Ever since that day, Naruto has not bothered with seeing the Hokage, other than for missions. "Ah Anko-chan, Fox, here for another mission?" the Hokage asked. He got a nod in reply from both, with Anko showing a huge smile. "Well, it's a simple mission." At that moment the door burst open and Team 7 entered the room. Naruto's heart started beating slightly faster at the revelation that his twin was in the room. Menma caught the feeling and signed in their secret language. Naruto responded, meanwhile, making it look like nothing important. "Ah Team 7, what can I do for you?" the Hokage asked, ignoring Fox and Anko completely. The other members of Team 7 looked at the other people in the room. Kakashi knew at that moment that Fox was Naruto. He still hadn't gotten over Naruto trying to challenge his authority in front of the Hokage and Anko. His face remained impassive, and he didn't give his emotions away. "We just completed a mission and are seeking a new one." The Hokage looked through his scroll and found the perfect candidate. "Here we go," the Hokage exclaimed, tossing a scroll to Kakashi. "It's a simple C-rank mission, escort a bridge builder to Nami no Kuni." At that, the Hokage motioned towards the door, where an elderly drunken fool entered, breathed stinking of sake. "HMPH, so this is the team that is going to protect me. Good to see you know how to take care of your clients." The bridge builder whistled softly, looking at Anko. At that moment, he felt extreme dread, and looked into the face of the fox. "Ah, there seems to be an issue," the Hokage stated. "This is Team 7, they will be escorting you home, not Anko and Fox." The Hokage explained, gaining the attention of those in the room. "So it seems," the bridge builder announced. "I'm Tazuna and I am a super bridge builder from Nami no Kuni. You'll have to escort me all the way home, and guard me whilst I complete my bridge." The bridge builder exclaimed, "We are to convene down by the main gate in an hour. Ensure you have everything you need for a 2-week mission." Dismissed. Kakashi dismissed his team to get ready, meanwhile staying behind to converse with the Hokage. Tazuna left at the same time as the genin of Team 7 did. Menma looked at Naruto prior to leaving, and smirked when Naruto signed, "Be careful." The smirk was caught by the Hokage, Kakashi and Anko. "Yes Kakashi?" the Hokage asked, wanting to see why the Jonin sensei of Team 7 stayed behind. "I was wondering if I could have a word with you, in private," Kakashi stated, looking in the direction of Fox and Anko. The Hokage thought for a second, before smiling and nodding to Anko and Fox. At his nod, Fox and Anko disappeared in a swirl of leaves. "I want to know more about what happened at Naruto and Menma's birth," Kakashi stated, looking the Hokage in the eye. The Hokage gauged Kakashi's question while taking out his pipe and lighting it, so the contents filled his lungs. He blew out a puff thinking on how to answer. What happened to the twins is an S-rank secret. Their birth remains the same, the Hokage said, looking Kakashi in his lone eye. Though certain aspects of their birth was revealed to the public, the rest remains thus, an S-rank secret. The Hokage intoned, taking another puff of his pipe. Kakashi stood in silence for a second, before explaining his reasonings. "I found some anomalies surrounding Menma and his chakra network. In particular, his extraordinary strength and stamina. What is of concern is that he cannot use any form of genjutsu whatsoever. I have an inkling that Naruto would be the complete opposite to his twin. Kakashi stated, seeing the subtle change in the Hokage's posture. To the untrained eye, it looked like nothing, but Kakashi saw the telltale signs of something, maybe surprise. I dare say that if we do test them against each other, we would find the difference in their powers outstanding. This is the reason why I wanted to know more about their birth, as it seems like something that could potentially inhibit my students' progress. Kakashi finished, explaining the reasoning behind such a question. There is nothing more I could tell you about that, Kakashi. The Hokage stated. Kakashi looked dejected by such a reply, but hid his emotions well. Nodding his head to his leader, Kakashi was about to leave the room. Another thing before you leave. The Hokage stated, causing Kakashi to look over his shoulder. Gato is not to be harmed. He is a business partner of Konoha, one that could have far-reaching consequences if something were to happen. The Hokage exclaimed, before dismissing Kakashi completely. Kakashi nodded once more to his leader before exiting the room. Fox and Anko returned to the Hokage's office a half an hour later. Both went their separate ways after their dismissal. What Anko didn't know was that Naruto spent his time spying on Kakashi and the Hokage. He wanted to know what Kakashi was going to ask the Hokage. He was slightly surprised by what Kakashi and the Hokage discussed, and wondered what it could mean for him and his twin. He was also confused regarding the Hokage's last statement. He knew of a Gato, but didn't know much more than him being a businessman. This intrigued him. I have a mission for you, Fox. It is a simple reconnaissance mission. The Hokage stated, gaining Fox's full attention, before continuing. You are to gather information and report it back to me directly. The Hokage said once more, taking his time to relay the mission. You are to travel to the border of Hai no Kuni and Aim no Kuni. You are not to infiltrate Aim no Kuni, only to observe. The Hokage stated, ensuring that Fox understood the message. You are to report on any activity vital to Konoha. Border security? Fox asked in a confused manner. Yes, look at it as another form of training. The Hokage stated, smirking slightly. You are to remain for a week and then report what you found. Beside Fox, Anko couldn't help but laugh. It was just too funny, knowing that Fox wanted to go on more solo missions. You are dismissed, Fox. The Hokage stated, nodding to Fox. With that, Fox poofed into smoke, the shadow clone relaying every detail to the original. Your mission is simple, Anko. You are to keep an eye on Fox. You are not to reveal your position, no matter what. The Hokage stated. Another babysitting mission? Anko asked, sounding slightly irritated. You are not to be seen. Complete discretion is a must. Fox must think that he is on this mission by himself. You will fail if he knows you are there. The Hokage said. His face was serious, telling Anko that this was a somewhat important mission, and that the Hokage was up to something. Anko nodded once before she too poofed into smoke. The Hokage grumbled about shadow clones, before another presence made himself known. You are to keep an eye on Anko and Fox. No doubt that Anko will get herself found out. You are not to reveal yourself for anything. The Hokage intoned, ensuring that the Anbu agent knew that he was serious about this mission. Hi Hokage-sama, the Anbu operative responded, before disappearing into the floorboards. Menma, Sasuke and Sakura were standing at the gate waiting for their client, Tazuna, and their sensei. Tazuna had to do some last-minute shopping for the trip home, leaving the genin to their own devices. The three were standing together discussing their skill set and talking about the upcoming mission. Each had their own idea of how the mission was going to pan out. I bet we'll fight some ninja along the way. Menma stated, looking excited. HMPH, I don't think it'll be much more than an escort mission. Sasuke intoned, raining on Menma's parade. This is going to be fun. Finally, a mission outside of Konoha. Sakura responded, looking out the gates one more time. Tazuna arrived after the statement, wondering what got these kids so excited. Still waiting for your sensei? Tazuna asked. Yeah, he should be here any second. Menma stated. At that moment, Kakashi poofed into existence. Well, it seems like we're all ready. Kakashi stated, before walking out the gates. Naruto was hoping to catch his twin before he left for Nami no Kuni. He wasn't given a break, however, as he just missed him. He had been living at Anbu HQ, and hadn't been home since that day. He found it easier to live there, in solitude, away from the brightness of the village. Plus, his sensei always came to visit, either for training or just to chat. He really liked Anko, and would do anything for her. She had a similar personality to his brother. Exuberant, bubbly, but when she shows her psychotic grin, no more happy-go-lucky Anko. She is replaced with a crazy bitch. Naruto would never call her that to her face though. Keeping the thoughts to himself, Naruto left on his solo mission. There was no time limit, but he wanted to get this over and done with. "Hey brat," Anko stated from behind him. She always liked to appear where he couldn't see. "I bought you some items for the road." Here she gave him a few scrolls. Inside one were brand new shuriken. Another scroll had kunai in them and the last had food for his enjoyment. "I also got you this," she stated, pulling out another scroll with some genjutsu in them. "From my friend, don't practice too much when you're on patrol though," she stated before disappearing in a poof of smoke. Naruto left his room at Anbu HQ and went to the secret exit of Konoha, before disappearing in a quick run. He wanted to get this mission over and done with as soon as possible. Team 7 were on their way to Nami no Kuni. They had set out at a brisk pace. The three genin were happy to be away from the village and going on their first C-rank mission. That excitement, however, started to dissipate after a while, and now they walked on in perpetual silence. "Tazuna," Sakura stated, gaining the attention of those around her. A question was evident on her mind. How come Nami no Kuni doesn't have any ninja? She asked, reflecting the thoughts of her teammates. Well, it's not a big country. We are a fishing and trading country that has no ties to the larger villages. We don't have any shinobi nor an academy. Tazuna responded, taking a swig of his bottle. At that moment the team walked past a few puddles on the ground. Kakashi noticed them, but the three genin were too involved with what Tazuna was saying to be wary of their surroundings. We'll have to fix that, Kakashi thought to himself. Chains wrapped around his being as he was chopped to pieces. He completed a replacement jutsu before that could happen though, as he wanted to see two things. The first was his team's reaction to what had just happened and the second was the actual target of the enemy shinobi. The three genin looked back to see Kakashi ripped to pieces. 1 down, 4 to go. One of the enemies stated, before charging at the genin cell. Menma stood frozen staring at the blood and body parts of Kakashi. Both nin reappeared behind him, ready to give him the same treatment as Kakashi. 2 down, one of the nin exclaimed. Menma was still stuck in the same place as the enemy nin closed in on him. At that moment, Sasuke sprang into action, pinning the chain to a tree. Sakura was already guarding Tazuna and was slightly surprised when Menma stopped moving. "What's the matter, Dobi?" Sasuke asked. He was just as confused as Sakura when he saw that Menma almost got killed. The enemy nin disconnected the chain. One was heading straight for Sakura and Tazuna, whilst the other went for Menma once more. Sasuke moved in front of Sakura and waited in a defensive stance for the enemy to attack. At the last second, Kakashi took both of the enemies out. He appeared out of thin air. "Good work Sakura, Sasuke," he stated looking at the two. He looked at Menma last, seeing the downtrodden look that he had. "Don't worry, it happens to the best of us," Kakashi stated, before walking past and tying the two nin to a tree. Menma looked down at his bleeding hand. "Better take care of that, they may have used poison on their equipment," Kakashi intoned. Menma pulled out his kunai and stabbed where the wound was. "Never again will I freeze, nor take a backward step," Menma exclaimed, as he watched the blood drip from his open wound. "Are you okay?" Sakura asked in a small voice. She looked really concerned for her teammate. "Yeah, I'm fine," Menma responded, scratching the back of his head with his good hand. "Let me," she stated, reaching for Menma's hand. When she took it, Menma had a little blush on his cheek. Sakura cleaned the wound and bandaged it. "All better," she stated, looking up at Menma. "Thanks," Menma responded, feeling better than he had a few minutes prior. "So Tazuna, care to tell me what's really going on?" Kakashi asked, having finished interrogating the enemy shinobi. "I don't know what you're talking about," Tazuna responded, paling ever so slightly. "Come now, they were good enough to tell the truth. Why can't you?" Kakashi stated, indicating the enemy shinobi. Tazuna thought a second longer before telling his story. Naruto had just arrived at the border and was scoping the place out when he felt his twin in distress. He lost his step and fell to the forest floor. He could feel his twin's strong emotions. It was fear, nothing but pure fear. After a few minutes it passed, and Naruto felt better. Supposed to be a C rank. He stated to himself, thinking of the mission Menma was on. Anko took note of the fall and was about to approach her apprentice to find out what had happened, but remembered the Hokage's words. "Damn brat," she whispered, before hiding her presence completely. Naruto got off the ground and continued on his path. That is a touching story. But I'm afraid that we must turn back. This is a C rank. Had you been straight with the Hokage, this would have been a B rank. Even an A- rank mission, with shinobi better equipped to deal with it. Kakashi stated, ready to make his way home. But they will kill my family. I have a daughter and a grandson. They will blame you for not assisting. Tazuna exclaimed, trying to gain sympathy from his traveling companions. Kakashi turned and started making his way towards Konoha. He stopped and turned, seeing his team in deep thought. We should complete the mission. Menma stated, looking from Tazuna to Kakashi. Tazuna took on a hopeful look at the words. I think we should too. It would leave a bad taste in my mouth otherwise. Sasuke stated, backing his teammate up. But I guess we should too. Sakura stated after a few seconds. Kakashi looked at the determined faces on his team. His lone eye hard and focused, he stated. The next enemies won't be Genin or Chunin. It will most likely be Junin rank shinobi. He exclaimed, hoping to get them to understand how dangerous this mission would be. We should complete the mission. Menma stated once more. We're almost there. Tazuna added, hoping to sway Kakashi. Fine, we'll complete the mission, Kakashi stated. Sasuke smirked, whilst Sakura laughed in semi-delight, semi-fear. Menma only smiled. Naruto had set his base in a small cave. He set traps around the place and found a secondary entrance. He also searched for other places suitable as a base and set a variety of traps in them. His plan was to change his camp every night. Anko kept observing her student, acknowledging the wisdom with his thought processes. Clever brat, she stated to herself. It was oh so amusing to her. Now for the first shift. Naruto stated, before traversing a set distance away and observing Aim no Kuni. This was going to be one long, boring mission. Team 7 and Tazuna arrived at the shores of Hai no Kuni. There the team were introduced to one of Tazuna's friend, and the person who would be taking them to Nami no Kuni via boat. All aboard, I guess. Kakashi stated with very little enthusiasm. The ride was very quiet with naught but the sound of the engine buzzing over the waves. Menma was astonished. This was the first time he had seen the ocean, and he couldn't believe it. He had heard about and read about the ocean, but seeing how vast it is, was something entirely different. At that instant, the engine stopped, and their driver started paddling them across the open sea. Why have you stopped the engine? Sakura asked, looking around at their driver. Gatu's men patrol these waters. The mist is good, so they may not see us. But this engine is loud, and they will definitely hear us. He replied, concentrating heavily on his work. Sakura nodded her head in approval, thankful for the answer. As they approached the shore, they took notice of a massive form through the mist. As they got closer, they could make out the cement bridge, beginning from Nami no Kuni and ending in the middle of the sea. Wow! Sakura exclaimed, whilst Menma was astonished to see such a sight. Sasuke seemed unfazed, but even he had to admit that it was an awesome sight to behold. Naruto was still in the same place observing the border when he had a brilliant idea. With no other thought in mind, he created 8 shadow clones. When they were created, each sprang into action and disappeared through the dense foliage. The original, well Anko hoped it was, stayed in the same place, keeping an eye on the border. Anko continued watching Naruto, only to witness something extraordinary. The figure of Naruto disappearing and was replaced with leaves and branches. Anko was confused and was about to approach the position that Naruto had hid. She stopped in silence however, as she felt the presence of other shinobi. She hid in wait until they came closer. She was surprised to find 2 figures walking from Aim no Kuni into Hai no Kuni. They were both dressed in black and had a straw hat covering their facial features. One was tall and had something huge wrapped in bandages on his back, the other was shorter, and carried himself with confidence. The large shinobi was talking non-stop, trying to get a rise out of his companion. They were close to Naruto's position, when the short one looked up at the tree where Naruto hid. Naruto felt the shinobi's presence long before he saw them. He knew that he had to stay hidden, so he chose to camouflage himself as a tree branch with leaves. The shorter shinobi looked up for a brief second. His eyes and that of Naruto's connected. Naruto saw the red eyes with the three tomo, before it morphed into something else. He knew that his hiding place was found out, and was waiting for the imminent attack. It came an instant later, when he found himself in some type of sewers, a large cage to one side of the sewers, and the enemy shinobi on the other. The Kyuubi. How interesting, the figure stated, looking through the cage. The Kyuubi opened his eyes and snarled at Naruto's opponent. "Damn Uchiha and your filthy eyes." The Kyuubi exclaimed, rising to his full height. "So you must be, let me see. One of the twins, not Menma, maybe Naruto, yes?" The nin spoke, this time directing his gaze at Naruto. His Anbu mask slipped away in that instant, revealing his cerulean-colored eyes. "Who are you?" Naruto asked, slightly on edge. This stranger knew who he was and his connection to the Kyuubi. "Ah, I think you already know who I am. You're trying to bide time, wait for some type of help. I'll let you in on a secret. By the time we're finished here, only a second will have passed by in the real world. My colleague and I will continue on our travels whilst you, and the Kunoichi, can do nothing about it." At this statement, Naruto's eyes widened slightly. He had a feeling he was being followed, but chalked it up to being his first solo mission. Now he had confirmation, and there was really only one Kunoichi he could think of that would take on the mission of babysitting him. "So what now, Itachi?" Naruto asked, watching the smirk on Itachi's face form. "This is your mind, but it is my world. I control it." At his words, the surrounding sewer disappeared and was replaced with a harsh desert. The sky was black and, what appeared to be the sun, was made of the Uchiha's eyes. "Now we don't have much time, so how about we get down to business?" Itachi stated, just as Naruto found himself strapped to a wooden stake. Team 7 arrived in Nami no Kuni. They thanked their chauffeur and continued traveling on foot. They walked for a half hour, stopping suddenly when Menma threw a kunai into the bush. Sasuke and Sakura were on high alert, and approached the bush with apprehension. Sakura lifted the bush, only to sigh as a white hair scampered away from her. "Menma!" she exclaimed before hearing her sensei shout, "Down!" With no further thought, she hit the deck. She looked up to find a large shinobi standing on a large sword. "He. Copycat Kakashi. Took on a team in your old age, yeah?" the large man asked, smirking at the genin in question. "Momochi Zabuza, demon of the bloody mist." Kakashi replied, looking at his foe. He looked at his team and nodded. With the signal, the three genin got into a protective position around their charge. "Why must we play at being shinobi?" Zabuza asked. "Just hand over the old man, I'll make sure it's a clean death." He smirked, eyeing the aged bridge builder. "You know we can't do that," Kakashi stated, lifting his covered eye, to reveal a fully developed Sharingan. "What, sensei? How did you get that eye?" Sasuke asked, tensing slightly with the revelation. "A long story, one I will share. However, now is not the time," Kakashi replied, the Sharingan straight up. "How privileged I must be," Zabuza exclaimed, before grabbing his large sword and disappearing from sight. He appeared on a small lake, hand in air, releasing chakra and radiating killing intent. Mist started to form around his being, before descending throughout the area. It took a few seconds for the mist to become thick enough that the members of Team 7 lost sight of Zabuza. Kidney, heart, throat, spinal column, lungs, liver, jugular vein, subclavian vein. Zabuza stated, relishing at the thought of killing. "So many to choose from," Zabuza exclaimed, readying himself for the attack. Sasuke was shaking slightly, eyes wide, as he felt the strength radiate off of Zabuza. Kakashi felt the presence of the genin change and decided to break the intensity. "Don't worry, I won't let anything happen to my comrades," he exclaimed, watching as Sasuke got his nerves under control. "I wouldn't be so sure about that," Zabuza stated from behind Tazuna, right in the middle of the genin's setup. He swung his large sword, but felt his ribs get pierced. Looking up, he was surprised to see Kakashi standing in front of him. He smirked, before turning into water. Another Zabuza appeared and swung his sword at Kakashi, watching as he too broke into water. The real Kakashi appeared behind Zabuza, Sharingan eye spinning. "It's over," Kakashi exclaimed, only to hear Zabuza speak again. "Oh, I wouldn't be so sure," he exclaimed, as Kakashi sliced the throat of the Zabuza in front of him. It turned into water as the real Zabuza appeared and swung his sword at Kakashi. Kakashi moved, but felt a hard hit to his stomach, winding him and sending him flying. Kakashi landed in the water, but couldn't use chakra to stand atop it. It was at this moment that he knew he lost, as Zabuza appeared behind him, forming a prison of water around Kakashi's entire being. "You almost had me, but in the end you failed," Zabuza exclaimed as he stuck his hand in the prison. "Time for your genin to die," Zabuza continued, creating a water clone to do his bidding. Menma looked towards Kakashi, then at his teammates. Sakura looked on in slight shock and Sasuke's face morphed into a sneer. "Take Tazuna and run. That is an order," Kakashi stated, much to the shock of Menma. He was about to turn when he remembered the promise he made to himself. He steeled his resolve, ready to attack at any second. A movement to the left caused him to look in that direction. He was surprised when he found the two nin that their sensei had dealt with, blocking their path to freedom. He, I forgot to tell you. My apprentices are in that direction," Zabuza intoned, causing Kakashi's eyes to widen once more. Sasuke and Sakura turned to face off against the two Chunin-level shinobi, whilst Menma focused his attention on Zabuza. "This may not work out so well for us," Menma stated, smiling slightly. "I still have a mission, so I will not die today." Sasuke responded, readying himself. He activated his eyes, and noticed the slight hesitation on his enemies' faces. "Sakura, watch Tazuna," Sasuke exclaimed, readying his attack. "Don't die, either of you," Sakura stated, as she took a guarding stance in front of Tazuna. Sasuke ran towards his opponents, going through hand signs at the same time. A large fireball was sent towards his enemies, splitting them up and causing them to dodge to the side. Sasuke read their movements and followed one of the enemies, kunai in hand. He appeared as the enemy was distracted, and slammed his kunai into the enemy's skull. "Gozu!" The other nin screamed, rushing towards Sasuke with anger-filled eyes. Sasuke was on the defense as his opponent assaulted his being. There was little to no room for error, as each swipe from his enemy would cause him damage. Sakura looked on quietly. It had happened in a matter of seconds. First Sasuke was near, then he disappeared and executed a grand fireball jutsu. Then he killed his opponent as if it was nothing. Now Sasuke was dodging each of his other opponent's strikes. She looked over her shoulder for a split second, just as Menma started his attack. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, creating 6 clones, before running headlong into his opponent. Zabuza actually smirked. What type of fool runs straight at their opponent? He asked, looking at the scene. "What have you been teaching these fools, Kakashi?" Zabuza continued, looking sideways at Kakashi. Each of the Menma pulled out a kunai and threw it at the Zabuza clone. The clone dodged each kunai, smirking slightly. "Is this all you got?" It taunted, only for Menma to smirk. Each kunai thrown turned into clones. All of them throwing further kunai at the Zabuza clone. Zabuza turned in time to parry the attacks, only to break into water, as the original Menma appeared behind him, sticking a kunai into his back. Zabuza smirked at Kakashi as his water clone disappeared. "So you have taught them to become true shinobi," he stated, as he created 3 more water clones and sent them towards Menma. Sakura was on edge, as each battle was intense. Sasuke continued to dodge his quarry, whilst Menma was up against 3 clones, instead of 1. Sasuke saw it, for a split second, at the corner of his eyes, he saw it. The senbon flew from the bush straight at his pink-haired teammate. It hit her in the neck, killing her instantly. Sasuke stilled at that moment, not believing his eyes. His opponent took that moment to press his attack, slicing Sasuke across the chest, drawing some blood. "Now," Zabuza stated then, watching as another senbon made its way into the bridge builder's neck. At the same moment, the original Zabuza let go of the water prison and disappeared. He appeared in front of the prone Tazuna, taking his head clean off with a swing of his sword. "Maizu, it is done," Zabuza stated to his apprentice. The nin stilled in his movements, obeying his sensei. Menma turned around at that moment, stilling in his movements as he saw Sakura lying dead on the ground. The clones he had been fighting disappeared, leaving him to stare at the original, standing over Sakura's body. In that moment, Menma saw red. Red chakra started swirling around him as his eyes changed color. His claws extended and he rushed straight at Zabuza. Zabuza was surprised by the foul chakra and remained in the same position standing over the dead body of Tazuna. Sasuke took that moment of distraction to kill his second opponent. His Sharingan had morphed as tears dropped from his eyes. The fourth nin appeared out of the shrubs, running straight towards the Kyuubi-induced Menma. He put up an ice mirror quickly, only to jump back as it shattered in front of him. Menma kept attacking, his hand stopped just before it plunged into the hunter nin's chest. Kakashi had acted quickly. Knowing what was happening, he made a quick dash towards Menma, stopping him from taking another life. "Enough, Menma. Our mission is over. There is no need for further bloodshed," he exclaimed, looking Menma in the eye. Menma snapped out of his daze as the red chakra left him. He fell to the ground beside Sakura's prone body, tears falling from his eyes. "You could have just handed the old fool over," Zabuza exclaimed. "Better leave now, before it's too late." Kakashi replied, looking Zabuza in the eyes. "At least be relieved. Your student took 2 of mine, whilst mine took 1 of yours." Zabuza intoned, disappearing from sight. Sasuke walked up to his fallen comrade, eyes now back to their original form. He knelt beside Naruto, looking down at his dead teammate. Kakashi covered his eye, knowing how much this was going to devastate his team. He looked up for a second before dropping to the ground. The stress of the Sharingan along with the stress of losing a comrade too much for his being. Naruto opened his eyes. As Itachi stated, only a second went by in the real world. The Uchiha kept walking as if nothing had happened, his partner following his strides. When they were a fair distance away, Naruto released the breath he had been holding. He knew his sensei was around, so he fell to the ground, exhaustion overtaking him. Anko came out of the bushes just in time to catch her apprentice. "Uchiha, Itachi," Naruto exclaimed, before darkness overtook him. "Damn it, now what do I do?" Anko said out loud, before picking up her young charge and heading to one of his ready-made bases. Anko was conflicted about this mission. On the one hand, she was not supposed to let her presence known to her student. On the other, he was seriously injured. Naruto had a high fever. His body was racked with cold sweats. He kept moaning and whimpering, like he was reliving a bad nightmare over and over again. The sun was beginning to set, the intensity of its rays lessening by the minute. Anko was still in 2 minds about this whole ordeal. She really needed to get her student out of here, but didn't want to run in with the Uchiha, if what her student had stated was true, or the other guy with him for that matter. She still didn't know what Itachi had done to Naruto, and worry was evident on her face. "Come on, brat, you can beat this damn fever," she whispered, wiping Naruto with a cool shirt once more. "Menma!" Naruto screamed as he awoke from his fever-induced sleep, causing Anko to jump back in fright. He looked around with unseeing eyes, trying his hardest to remember where he was. He looked at his sensei, before trying to stand. "I need to go to Menma." He slurred, trying to force himself to stand. Anko was pushing Naruto down, however, whispering sweet nothings all the while. "Damn it, brat, you can't go anywhere just yet. Not until you get a little better," Anko exclaimed through gritted teeth. Naruto closed his eyes once more, this time falling into a light sleep. His breathing was better than before, and the fever went down considerably. Anko knew that it wouldn't be long till the Anbu in training awoke, as if nothing was wrong. This she knew from experience. No matter how bad Naruto had it, he would always bounce back within a day or so. "Now what do we do?" Menma asked Sasuke. They were both still in shock. "We need to move the bodies. We have to get to a safe place," Sasuke replied, trying to think straight. "Create some clones to carry them. We'll make this quick by using the trees. We should try and find Tazuna's place," Sasuke continued, a plan forming in his head. Menma wanted to move, but his legs wouldn't conform to his thoughts. The tears had stopped running down his and Sasuke's face. He looked up for a second, taking a deep breath, before breathing out and standing. Menma did as Sasuke asked and created 3 clones. He knelt before Sakura, and pulled the senbon from her neck. Once he did that, Sakura took in a deep breath and started screaming in pain, scaring Menma and Sasuke in the process. Sakura looked around in confusion, noticing her teammates looking at her with wide eyes. They were both pale white, looking as if they saw a ghost. What happened?" she asked. She tried to move but was racked with excruciating pain. "You're alive," Menma exclaimed. "You're alive," he stated once more, causing Sakura's eyes to widen in surprise. Sasuke exhaled at this point. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. His teammate was alive, now they had to deal with their unconscious sensei. "We don't have much time," Sasuke stated, making a motion towards the setting sun when Menma looked in his direction. Menma created another 2 clones at this time. 2 he set to carrying their sensei, another 2 took charge of carrying their dead client. The original helped with carrying Sakura as Sasuke took point. Menma created 1 more clone to scout the trail ahead. Sasuke, Menma and his clones started running up the trees, jumping from one branch to the next. It didn't take long for them to reach the outskirts of the village. The Menma clone knocked on the door of the first house, waiting patiently for an answer. A lady came to answer the door. She looked at Menma, waiting for him to speak. "Can I help you?" she asked, noticing that the boy in front of her wasn't going to talk. "I'm from Konoha, we came here with Tazuna, the bridge builder. We are looking for his place," the clone stated, its face showing no expression at all. "Tucson, I am his daughter, where is he?" she stated before asking. "Good to know," the clone exclaimed before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Better to let the original explain what happened thus far. The girl looked on in shock at what transpired. She took a step outside and looked around the vicinity. She could not find any proof that the boy had been there. Feeling slightly scared, she closed the door and locked it behind her. She had a bad feeling all day. Thinking that it was her mind playing tricks, she didn't dwell on it too much. Now that feeling intensified tenfold. "It's not too far away," Menma exclaimed after acquiring the thoughts of his clone. His face contorted into worry as his clone took note of the distraught and distracted look that their client's daughter wore. "Good," Sasuke responded, glad that they had been making better time. They arrived at the house a few minutes later. Sasuke was on point, so he took the lead and knocked on the door. The same young lady answered the door. She looked at Sasuke, then at the multiple clones. She took note that they were carrying 3 people. One was a girl, the second was an unknown man, but the third, she could see, was the still body of her father. "I'm very sorry for your loss. We tried to protect him, but his enemies were very strong," Sasuke stated, head down slightly, showing little hint of emotion. The girl screamed at this time, and fell into a heap on the ground. She was racked with sobs, as a young boy came running from the back of the house. One look at the body, and he too had tears in his eyes. He looked at Sasuke, then at Menma, before joining his mother on the ground. "We didn't know what to do with the body, so we bought it here," Menma exclaimed to the crying woman. She heard his voice, and stood, sobs still evident on her being. She told them to bring the body inside, to which the clones obliged. They placed the body in the lounge. The young lady walked to the door and slammed it, once the clones burst. "We'll have to find a place to lay low," Sasuke stated, concern in his voice. "We may still have to protect them," Sakura intoned from her prone position. "We cannot do both. It'll put too much strain on us," Menma added, feeling the effects of the day catching up. Sasuke looked no better, and Sakura was still in pain. Kakashi was awake, but chose to remain silent. He was relieved that the kunoichi was still alive. Her voice is what woke him up. Kakashi also wanted to see what his team would do. He knew that they needed direction, but this will determine how much they have matured over the past few months. "I think we should protect them. We'll have to be close, in case someone wants to end what had happened today," Sakura exclaimed. They were still at the door discussing their options, not really knowing what they should do. "Let's get into the trees," Sasuke stated. The clones carrying Kakashi looked at the original, before placing their charge on the ground. They burst at the same time. Menma was silent for a second, before him and the other clone placed Sakura on the ground. This clone popped as well. "What shall we do, Kakashi-sensei?" Menma asked in a defeated tone. Sakura tried to look at Kakashi, but failed. Sasuke looked in surprise, wondering when Kakashi had awoken. Kakashi's eyes started fluttering open. "We may need to do both," Kakashi intoned, looking at Menma and Sasuke. He looked at Sakura last, lying on the ground. "Let's move now," he stated. Menma created 4 clones that took on the role of carrying both Sakura and Kakashi. They got back into the trees, Sasuke taking point whilst Menma brought up the rear. The trees that they were in was a part of a large forest, each ending high in the sky. "Stop," Menma exclaimed, as Sasuke pulled out his kunai, ready for another battle. Menma looked around him for a second before creating 100 shadow clones. Each clone jumped into action and ransacked their former client's tool shed for materials and tools. Once this was done, they all got to work in creating planks connecting 5 trees together. Roughly an hour went by, and a makeshift, though probably unsafe, crow's nest was created. The cubby house gave them a good vantage point on their former client's house as well as cover from the environment. Sasuke looked surprised at the transformation. He couldn't help at all, as he wasn't too sure what was actually happening. Sakura fell asleep, the pain of her injuries taking its toll on her. Kakashi looked on with a sad gaze. He knew that Menma and Naruto had created many makeshift homes over the years. Especially on their birthday. "All done," Menma exclaimed, as the clones popped out of existence. It was a simple construct. 4 trees acted as a corner, where the walls ran through, whilst the middle tree acted like a stabilizer, ensuring that the ground was securely in place. It wasn't flash, but it got the job done. Nor was it large, as it was suited for 8 people lying next to each other. "Well done, Menma," Kakashi exclaimed, eyes smiling all the while. Menma and Sasuke took out all of the sleeping supplies and made 4 beds. 2 for their fallen comrades, whilst the other 2 for themselves. They placed Sakura in one of the beds, and Kakashi in the other. "I'll be out of commission for a few days, but I don't think anything bad will pass in that time," Kakashi exclaimed, looking at Menma and Sasuke. "She may take longer," Kakashi continued, motioning towards Sakura. At this point the final 2 clones popped, transferring their memories back to the original. Menma's eyes glazed over for a second, before he dropped to the floor. Sasuke didn't react in time to catch him, whilst Kakashi exhaled a deep breath. His clones were working for so long. He must have been running on empty. Kakashi intoned, as Sasuke picked Menma up and placed him on the 3rd bed. "I'm sorry to say, but you may have to take the shift tonight?" Kakashi continued, looking at Sasuke. "It will not be easy, but once Menma regains consciousness, you'll have your chance to rest," Kakashi concluded. Sasuke nodded at this. Naruto awoke in the middle of the night. He was in one of his hideouts, mask still in place. He looked around, but couldn't find his sensei, assuming she went back to her post, observing. He felt everything that had happened to Menma during the day. He knew that his brother was in serious danger. Thinking more on it, Naruto created a few clones. Each he sent to a different vantage point. He remained in the base, hoping that his sensei wouldn't figure out what had happened. Each clone went in a different direction, taking cover over the different vantage points. Anko was observing her student, when she noticed him start to shimmer and blend in with his surroundings. This she found surprising, as it was the exact same thing he did when the enemy shinobi crossed from Aim no Kuni into Hai no Kuni. Anko was on high alert and continued to monitor the original's form. A half-hour passed when the form of where Naruto had been disguised disappeared in a poof of smoke. Cursing to herself, she quickly made her way towards the base. She had chosen to leave Naruto at this particular base, as it gave her a good hiding spot and vantage point to keep an eye on him. Now her student had pulled a fast one. "Damn brat," she stated before biting her thumb, drawing blood, and going through some hand signs. A second later a snake appeared from a poof of smoke. "Track down my foolish student," she exclaimed as the small snake started flicking its tongue. The small snake climbed up Anko's body and rested on her shoulder. "This SSSSS way, Anko SSSSSAMA," the snake exclaimed. Naruto was quickly making his way to Nami no Kuni when his final clone popped. He swallowed nervously, knowing that his sensei wasn't going to like this at all. His sensei was probably going to take a few days to reach his destination. Naruto would probably get there in the early hours of the next morning, if he continued at the rate he was traveling. Anko and Naruto still had no idea that they were being trailed. One was following a safe distance from Naruto whilst the other was keeping an eye on Anko. He was glad that he had useful skills in reconnaissance, tracking and hiding. It was the early hours of the morning when Kakashi opened his lone eye. Sasuke was still on duty, trying his hardest not to fall asleep, eyes heavy and drooping slightly. Kakashi looked at Sakura, who was still asleep, with concern in his eyes. He still didn't know how she was faring and how long it would take for her to recover. He also knew that she was put in a death-like state. Kakashi felt the need to wake when he had, yet he still hadn't found the reason. He looked towards his third student, knowing that exhaustion was the cause of his fatigue. He had a feeling that Menma would be wide awake in the morning, as if he hadn't fainted the day before. Something caught Kakashi's eye as he continued to gaze at Menma. A shimmering of the surroundings caused his eyes to widen just a bit. Sasuke felt Kakashi's chakras spike and quickly got on alert. So did the figure, leaning over Menma. "It's all right, Kakashi," the figure exclaimed, revealing himself entirely. Sasuke was still on edge, wondering how this shinobi snuck past him. He slowly reached for his kunai. "Don't do it, Uchiha," the figure stated, revealing his fox mask. "You," Sasuke exclaimed, eyes narrowed slightly. "Anbu-san, are you here on a mission?" Kakashi asked, knowing full well who the young Anbu operative was. "What happened?" Naruto asked, ignoring Kakashi completely. Sasuke was put further on edge at Naruto's tone. It held no emotion whatsoever. "Mission went south," Sasuke stated through gritted teeth. Menma opened his eyes at this moment. "Naruto," he stated. He closed his eye again before opening it wide. "Naruto," he exclaimed once more, before hugging his twin. "Wait, what are you doing here?" Menma asked, astonished. "What happened?" Naruto asked. Menma looked at Kakashi, then at Sasuke, before turning his gaze towards Sakura. "I thought she died. I turned. I used its. I lost control," Menma exclaimed, looking dejected. "It's okay," Naruto exclaimed, standing in front of Menma. "I have to go. I'm not supposed to be here," he continued, signaling all the while his intent. Sasuke and Kakashi took note of the way the twins were moving, but neither knew what it meant. Naruto had asked who was involved and Menma gave Naruto all the information that he wanted. Gato was responsible for sending the enemy shinobi after Team 7's client. The same Gato that the Hokage asked Kakashi not to kill. "My sensei will be looking for me. I have to flee as soon as possible," Naruto continued, disappearing through the makeshift entrance. Sasuke looked at Menma, and then at Kakashi. "What was that?" he asked. Menma looked at Sasuke for a second, before dropping his head. "Don't worry about it. Naruto had to leave before his sensei arrived," Menma stated, mirroring what Naruto had just stated. "That's not what I meant and you know it," Sasuke responded, looking intently at Menma. "I'll tell you one day, just not today," Menma responded. Sasuke actually looked a little hurt by the statement, but hid it by looking out of the makeshift window. "The sun is going to rise soon," Sasuke exclaimed. "I need to rest," he continued, before looking back at Menma. "I'll take the shift. I feel alright. Close to 100%. Menma stated, jumping up from his bedding. Sasuke looked at Menma for a second, before popping down on his bed, and falling straight to sleep. Kakashi looked at the scene with a little sadness. He didn't mind that Naruto and Menma still have a strong bond. What made him sad was that Sasuke felt left out from his teammate. A young woman walked through the street. She was dressed plainly in a brown kimono. Her hair was dark in color and flowed down to her back. She had a plain face and didn't stand out. A group of thugs noticed the girl walking by and decided to follow her. She quickly walked into a dark alleyway, the thugs following a few paces behind. "Hi boys," the women exclaimed, turning around. The thugs stood in shock as the woman in front of them transformed into a person with a fox-painted mask. Their eyes widened further, as they got hit in the back of their heads. Naruto's created clones took the 5 thugs into one of the abandoned buildings. They tied them to a wooden chair, ensuring they can't escape. Each of the thugs started coming through, waking from the hit to the back of their head. What are we doing here?" one of the thugs asked, before looking down at his body, then up to the figure in front of him. "Let me out of here right now," he exclaimed, with a mix of anger and fear in his eyes. He looked around and noticed his comrades in the same condition as he was in. "I don't need all of you, but all of you can be free," Naruto stated, pulling out his kunai. "I'm looking for information on Gato. Can you help?" he asked, pointing his kunai at the thug who spoke. "I'm not saying a word," the thug exclaimed, spitting at the direction of the fox. That's okay, Naruto stated, as he sliced the thug's throat. The other captives looked on in shocked silence, not knowing what had just happened. I want to know where Gato is holed up, and the location of the shinobi he had hired. Naruto stated once more, this time pointing at another thug. Gato is holed up at the northern district, in one of the large estates. The shinobi left as soon as they got paid. The thug responded, fearing for his life. Now if I let you leave, will you take another innocent life? Naruto asked, showing them the kunai once more. The thug's eyes widened as they nodded their head in the negative. So be it, Naruto stated, as the 4 thugs were grabbed from behind and sliced across the throat. No loose ends, Naruto recited from memory as his clones popped. 5 thugs walked straight through the front gates. They were each smiling and talking to each other, laughing at an inside joke. They continued walking through the large precinct, destination unclear. As if on cue, the 5 thugs broke apart, going in their own direction. The first was to patrol the ground and get a layout of the land. The second was to discover as many entrances and exits there were to the mansion. The third was to determine the number of enemies within the stronghold. The fourth was to find any prisoners that may be in need of rescuing. The fifth was tasked with tracking down and locating their target. So far, the disguised clones were doing well, neither drawing attention from any of the other thugs. Naruto was on the roof of a neighboring building, invisible to the naked eye, watching what transpires inside the compound. There were guards posted at the entrances, but they were semi-relaxed and didn't really fulfill their roles. The 5 clones completed their task and made their way towards the main entrance. They walked straight through the large gates. Once they were out of sight, they burst, transferring their memories back to the original. There were roughly 150 enemies within the building. Gato was holed up in the large room to the east. His door was guarded by 2 sword-wielding samurai wannabes. There were prisoners in the dungeon, and most of them were female. It looked as if Gato was in another form of trade. There were many dark zones within the compound, places where bodies could be placed once killed. There were also a variety of different entrances and exits, each easily accessible to an Anbu operative. Naruto decided that he would complete his self-made mission this afternoon. Now though, he needed some rest. Before he could close his eyes, his lookout clone closest to the shore of Hai no Kuni burst, letting the original know that his sensei was on the way. No time to waste, I guess, he stated, before creating 9 clones. 4 of the clones transformed into the thugs, whilst the rest transformed into women. Each was made after the different women that Naruto had met, except they were older. One was based off of his sensei, in looks as opposed to dress standards. Another was based off his former classmates, the Yamanaka, Haruno and Hyuga girl. Each were a little different than the originals, however. The final female he shaped after Ayami, the ramen chef at Ichiraku's. The original transformed into the last thug. Anko had just arrived in Nami no Kuni. She continued in the direction that her snake advised, and was surprised when it led her to the makeshift cover of Team 7. She was conflicted, should she go to them and ask if they had seen her apprentice, knowing full well that Naruto would have seen Menma for whatever reason. This would no doubt cause a stir-up if those in Konoha heard. Or should she ignore them, and continue searching for her soon-to-be-dead apprentice? She knew she had failed the mission. Her student purposefully made a clone to distract her. Now she was going to kill him, or close enough to it. What could be worse? She stated, before hiding her snake in her pocket and making her way towards the shelter. It was just after 10 a.m. and she knew that Kakashi, at least, would recognize an approaching nin. She deliberately spiked her chakra as she waited on one of the branches adjacent to the hut. Menma was at the entrance, kunai in hand, looking to impale the enemy. You definitely are twins. Now where is Kakashi? Anko stated, getting straight to the point. Menma's eyes widened slightly, before he looked towards his sensei. Kakashi was still on the bed, slowly getting up at the sound of Anko's voice. Well. The mighty Kakashi, nothing but a hollowed-out shinobi. Got beaten, did you? Anko asked with a smirk. She saw that Kakashi would be better soon. Meh, it does happen once in a while. Kakashi stated, eyes smiling all the while. This was Kakashi's aloof face. He pretended to be an idiot. Only those who knew Kakashi had some idea of what he was really like. What can we do for you? He asked. My student came by here. Where is he? Anko stated, then asked. I'm assuming he came for you. Here Anko pointed at Menma. And now he is doing something stupid. She concluded. What? Aniki said he had to get back to his mission. He said he was just checking up on me. Menma exclaimed. Kakashi looked at Menma for a second. So, they have their own secret sign language. Good to know. Kakashi thought to himself. Just came from Hai no Kuni. Didn't pass him on the way. Besides, one of his clones was spotted by the docks. He burst as soon as I showed up, no doubt warning the original. Anko stated, more to herself than the others. But what happened here? Anko asked. Kakashi thought for a moment, before deciding to explain. We were up against Momochi Zabuza and his 3 apprentices. One of them put Sakura in a death-like state. She won't be recovering anytime soon. The same shinobi put our client, I'm assuming, in the same state, before Zabuza took his head off. Kakashi stated. Menma slowly lowered his head at this, feeling like he couldn't do anything for his teammate. Failed mission. They're one of the worst. Anko replied. Do you need assistance? Anko asked in afterthought. It wasn't good to leave fellow Konoha nin unprotected. Kakashi was going to reject the offer, feeling it his duty to do so, but he swallowed his pride and nodded his head in the affirmative. We'll be back this way soon. First I've got to teach my apprentice who's boss. Anko exclaimed with a killer glint in her eye. She looked at Menma, who had a semi-scared look on his face. Don't tell him I was here, brat, or you'll be next. She exclaimed, before making a dash towards the town district. Each dark zone was filled with corpses, and more clones were created to take their place. Each took on the role of a thug and played it to perfection. One thug took the prisoners into the cells. The guards on duty were dead before they knew what hit them, each body being placed in the cells. The men, women and children were released and told to walk, not run, out of the compound. They each obliged, with fear-stricken eyes. When they exited the cells, they were surprised when the thugs spoke to them in the same soft monotonous tone, telling them not to run, but to walk calmly back to their families. Naruto was making his way down the corridor which led to his target. He saw the 2 thugs, whom looked at him, and placed their hand on their swords. Before they could draw, however, they both lost their heads. An after-image of Naruto as a thug was what they were looking at. Naruto created 2 clones that took the thugs' place and hid their bodies. He had killed 154 people today, but there was one more head he was going to take. The disguised thugs opened the door to allow Naruto in. He was in his original form, with his Anbu mask in place covering his face. He walked straight up to Gato, who didn't seem surprised by his appearance. Ah, Anbu-san, how is Konoha nowadays? Gato asked. He reached under his desk and pressed a silent alarm. The disguised clones, all at once, stopped to look at the flashing red light. They had never thought this possible, so they each made their way towards the location of the original. I'm here to collect, Naruto exclaimed, the mask distorting his voice slightly. Ah yes, I have what you want right here. Gato stated, as each disguised clone entered the large room. They all stood in a semi-circle behind the original, brandishing each of their swords. Good guess, Naruto thought. One of the clones had popped, letting Naruto know that a silent alarm had been triggered. Gato was smiling victoriously on his chair, swinging from side to side as if he ruled the world. I know you're not from Konoha, as they often have a blank mask. Gato exclaimed. Where are you from, or better yet, why are you here? He asked, feeling thrilled with the power that he controlled. I'm here to collect, Naruto stated once more, causing Gato to narrow his eyes. Kill him, he stated to the thugs. I have a few questions before death, Naruto exclaimed, watching Gato rub his hands together slightly, before nodding his head. How much are you paying Konoha? Do they know of your extra activities? Are they involved further in this? Naruto asked his 3 questions, causing glee to shine forth from Gato's face. I pay them enough to keep them at bay, but they have no idea about the real industry I am involved with. They think that I am a shipping trader, providing services to those that can afford it. They are a foolish bunch. I wouldn't trust them with any information I have, Gato stated, placing a hand on the book on his desk. He had answered Naruto's questions and nodded towards his group of thugs. None moved an inch at his nod, however. Something to remember in your next life, Naruto stated as all the thugs turned into carbon copies of him. Never underestimate shinobi. Here the thugs disappeared in a large blast of smoke. Gato's eyes had widened and his jaw was hanging low. He looked at the remaining nin with fear in his eyes. Fox, stop! Anko exclaimed from the door. The body of Gatu was hidden behind Naruto's own, so she couldn't see if Gatu was dead or not. As if to answer her question, the image of Fox started fading slowly. An afterimage of him appeared behind Gatu, before the throat of the tycoon was slashed. You fool! Anko exclaimed out loud. Naruto merely sheathed his kunai, knowing his sensei was going to kill him. Instead, she just looked at him one last time, before turning and walking away. Naruto stood in silence, the memories of what his clones had done, coming to the forefront of his mind. He closed his eyes, before opening them again. No one could see how hard these eyes were. They looked as if they belonged to a veteran shinobi. Naruto looked towards the desk, grabbing the book Gatu had touched, before jumping out the window. Now he had to go and see his brother. Ah, so it was too hard to conceal your presence from your apprentice? The Sandame asked Anko. Her face had lost all its expression, a steel gaze in her eyes. Please explain what had happened. The Sandame continued, lighting his pipe before taking a drag, a sign that he was in deep thought, and willing to listen. Fox had set up camp along the border. On the first day, however, 2 enemy shinobi came from Aim no Kuni. When they passed, Fox fell from the tree. He was in a state of disarray, and ran a high fever that night. He said something about Uchiha Itachi. I concluded that one of the enemies was the Uchiha. Anko exclaimed, as Fox stood still listening to the verbal report. Fox's fever broke and he started to get better. He created a few clones and replaced himself with one of them. I didn't find out till later that he had left for Nami no Kuni. I only found him thanks to my tracking skills. Anko stated, not informing the Hokage of the skills the snake summons possess. The Sandame was going to speak, before Anko continued. I came across Team 7, whom had failed their escort mission. Uzumaki, Haruno and Hitaki were hurt on the mission. Anko stated. Fox was still silent, but in his mind, he knew that he was screwed. His sensei had not spoken a word to him after he had killed Gatu. Uzumaki explained what had happened and that Fox had just finished speaking with them. I tracked Fox to a large precinct when I saw a red light flashing. Some thugs were rushing into the building. I followed them, and found Fox in one of the rooms. He killed Gatu. Anko stated, much to the silence of those present. We remained with Team 7 until they were ready for travel. We arrive in Konoha before them. Anko concluded. The Sandame took another puff from his pipe before looking at Fox. He then looked at Anko. Anko, he stated in a soft tone. Anko stiffened at the words, her face still stone cold. Thank you for your report, you are dismissed. The Hokage exclaimed. Anko turned on her heels and walked straight out the door, not even looking at her apprentice. Fox, the Sandame stated, gaining the young Anbu's attention. What did Itachi say? He asked, taking note of the subtle shift in Fox's character. Fox did not see this coming. He said that there were a group of S-rank shinobi targeting Jinchuriki. He has been tasked with bringing the Konoha Jinchuriki to the leader. The purpose was to extract the tailed beasts from within. He said that he isn't sure of the purpose behind the extraction, and that they aren't ready for the process just yet. He said a few years at most. Fox exclaimed, taking note of the Sandame's calculating gaze. He was surprised when the Hokage asked the question, but still relayed everything Itachi had stated. Well, almost everything. Thank you. The Sandame stated, before standing. Now your mission was to keep an eye on the border of Aim no Kuni. Itachi was supposed to meet you there and relay this information, without raising the suspicion of his teammate. You were not aware of this detail, and it is an S-rank secret, punishable by death. The Sandame stated, staring intently at the fox-faced Anbu member. Your sensei is not so forgiving, and you will have to work hard to gain her trust. She does not know these details, nor will she find out. Understood? The Hokage stated, then asked. Naruto nodded his head once, trying to think of a way to confide in his sensei. Your escapade in Nami no Kuni was not a part of your mission, and could have compromised our position. You killed a business partner of Konoha in cold blood, and left an injured team without support. You are hereby placed on probation. Over the next few months, you will be accompanied by other Anbu operatives on all your missions. The Hokage stated, standing right in front of Naruto. You are dismissed. The Hokage intoned, turning from Fox and walking towards the window. Naruto gulped slightly when the Hokage turned away. He couldn't move, and was paralyzed in front of the Hokage. He was grateful for the punishment he received, as he knew it should have been worse. With no further thought in mind, he turned and walked out the door, making his way to his and Menma's home. He hadn't been there in a while, but felt it was better than heading back to Anbu HQ, considering the mood his sensei was in. The mission was a failure, Kakashi stated, after giving a verbal report to the stoic Sandaime Hokage. Menma, Sasuke and Sakura had dropped their heads, thinking that it was their fault to begin with. Sakura still wasn't 100%, and their journey back to Konoha took longer than it should have. Sasuke still hadn't spoken more than 3 words to Menma on their way back from Nami no Kuni. Menma was also, surprisingly, quiet. There were some instances when he would talk, but most of the time he remained silent. It happens, the Sandaime stated. We'll have to reimburse the family the amount that the bridge builder paid. The Sandaime continued. Team 7, you are dismissed. The Sandaime exclaimed, before continuing. Kakashi, stay behind please. With that, the members of Team 7 left through the door. Sasuke taking the lead, Sakura in the middle, whilst Menma bringing up the rear, each with their heads slightly lowered. Each genin wanted to get home as soon as possible, and try to get this disastrous mission out of their minds. How are they? The Sandaime asked in a polite tone. Kakashi thought for a second, before answering. They are heartbroken, they got beaten pretty easily. They feel like they're weak, and that they need to train more to get stronger. Sakura is recovering well after the false death state. Sasuke and Menma haven't really spoken to each other yet. Kakashi concluded, taking out his book to read. Gato was not to be killed. The Sandaime stated, causing Kakashi to lower his book. It wasn't your fault, Kakashi. Fox is a highly skilled Anbu operative. He was on an assignment that should never have placed him in the same vicinity as his brother. He has been reprimanded for his actions. The Sandaime stated, causing Kakashi to nod at him. Kakashi knew that Naruto had gotten off easily. On the one hand, he was glad, but on the other he was surprised. This should never happen when it came to Anbu operatives. Kakashi knew that as a fact. Thank you for keeping them safe, Kakashi. The Sandaime concluded, smiling at the Junin sensei. Hi Hokage-sama, Kakashi responded, before making his way towards the door. The Sandaime dropped his gaze to his lap. He just got further confirmation on a theory he was working on. The connection between Naruto and Menma was very strong and involved emotions. They could feel each other from opposite sides of Hai no Kuni. This he found very interesting. Minato, Kushina. The Hokage thought wearily, looking at the picture of the Yondaime Hokage. Menma and Naruto awoke to banging on the door. Naruto got up first, answered the door, and was surprised when his sensei pulled a kunai out and started attacking him. Thinking quick, Naruto moved out of the range of the kunai, but was hit by a boot straight into his chest. He was sent further into the apartment, as Menma opened his bedroom door. Realizing who had hit his twin, he quickly closed the door and went back to sleep. This is one of the consequences his brother had to deal with. Naruto started rising slowly, only to get hit in the back of the neck, knocking him out cold. With her anger semi-sated, Anko bent down, picked her student up, and slung him over her shoulders. Naruto awoke with the sun shining on his face. He was surprised when he found himself tied to the Hokage monument. He was bare naked, and the ropes were tied together using ninja wire and chakra. When he tried to move, a shuriken came flying from the top. Naruto looked up in a panic, noticing his purple-haired sensei, wearing an evil smirk. Naruto gulped slightly, knowing this was going to be a long morning. Time to get started, Anko stated, before throwing shuriken at the confined body of Naruto. Naruto slowly opened his eyes once more. He was in a room with white walls with a strong smell of antiseptic in the air. He tried to move, but felt extreme pain coursing through his body. His entire body felt like it was on fire. He recalled the last memory he had when a face became visible to his uncovered eyes. He gulped and started cold sweating, his body reliving the pain once more. Now brat, what do you have to say for yourself? Anko asked, brandishing a kunai, and stopping it millimeters from Naruto's blue eye. I am so Ori. Sense? Save it brat. Anko cut in before Naruto could finish. I don't want your apologies, I don't want your excuses. I only want the truth. Anko stated, as Naruto blinked his eye, showing he was listening. How did you know I was on your trail, and what did Itachi do to you? She asked. Naruto thought for a moment, before deciding to answer. He knew that his sensei would kill him, or close enough to it, if she wasn't appeased. Firstly, Itachi told me that a kunoichi was concealing her presence nearby. My first thought was that it was you. Naruto exclaimed, fear still evident in his voice. Anko's eyes widened slightly at this, before concentrating on Naruto once more. Secondly, I was in some type of genjutsu. Itachi took control of me for 3 days, but in the real world, only a second went by. Naruto stated softly, closing his eyes slightly, and putting on a sad face. Anko looked at Naruto's facial muscles, to determine if her apprentice was lying to her. She withdrew the kunai, just as Naruto opened his eyes. Rest. When you are better, come see me, she stated, before walking out the door. Menma walked into the room with some flowers. He noticed that his twin was still asleep and couldn't believe how much he had changed. He had found out that Gatu and his mercenaries had been killed. Word around Nami no Kuni was that it was some type of demon with a fox's face. Menma had tried to ask Naruto what had happened when they were in High no Kuni, but Naruto more or less closed himself out. He would say not to worry about it, and that it was over. Naruto was always quiet, but he hadn't been this closed off from Menma, so this really scared him. Menma moved closer to the bed, noticing that Naruto was covered in bandages from head to toe, with only his mouth and eyes unveiled. He placed the flowers at the desk, before taking his seat at the available chair. Menma wasn't going to stay long, he just felt like visiting his brother. Why did you have to be in Anbu? Menma asked himself, looking at his brother all the while. Menma exhaled a breath, deep in thought for once. Naruto opened his eyes, and looked towards his brother. I wasn't always going to be around, he stated. You'd have to grow up eventually. Naruto exclaimed, taking a shuddering breath before releasing. He knew some of his ribs were broken, so too his arms and legs. He hoped that he would recover within the next week or so, considering his regenerative ability. Yeah, I know, Menma responded, sounding dejected. Why can't we be closer, like when we were kids? Before. Here Menma exhaled, before continuing. Before we knew about the Kyuubi, he stated, looking up at Naruto. Naruto couldn't bear his twin's gaze, so looked straight at the ceiling. I knew of the Kyuubi long ago, Naruto exclaimed. It was silent for a while, so Naruto looked over to his brother. Yeah, I figured. You were always good at figuring things out like that. I'm not really surprised. But why didn't you tell me? Menma asked, his face morphing into one of sadness. Naruto's face was the same, he was displaying little to no emotion. You know the answer. But maybe I shouldn't have held this information from you. Maybe I should have told you, instead of trying to protect you. Naruto exclaimed, this time letting some emotion into his voice. What's done is done, Menma stated cheerily. Hope you get better, I got to go and check up on my teammates. Menma concluded, standing up and walking towards the door. You were always the stronger out of us, Naruto whispered to himself. Menma heard those words, but quietly disagreed. It's a secret language Naruto and I made when we were kids, Menma stated, standing across from Sasuke. One of us was always left out, or we needed to communicate without people knowing. This is what we came up with, Menma continued, looking up to see if he had Sasuke's attention. It's complex, but I could show you, and Sakura, of course. I should have told you this earlier. Would have been easier to communicate with each other as well, Menma concluded, slumping his shoulders a bit. How's your brother? Sasuke asked. Menma was surprised as this was the first time that Sasuke had inquired about his twin's well-being. He's fine, probably be out of hospital in a week or so. Maybe. His sensei really did a number on him, Menma stated, smirking slightly at the end. Sasuke caught the smirk, and wanted to know why Menma wore it now, of all times, when his brother was in hospital. Oh, it's just that, well, I'm glad she isn't our sensei. Could you imagine us lying in bed trying to recover? Menma lied, not really telling Sasuke that, just as he had found a new family, so too did his twin. Sakura arrived at that moment. Sorry I'm late, was busy collecting some information from the library, Sakura stated by way of apology. Ah, we're all here? Good, Kakashi asked then stated. He appeared out of nowhere, and slightly surprised his team. Let's get down to business, he stated, pulling his book from his pack. Come at me with the intent to kill. Kakashi exclaimed, ignoring the look that the trio were giving him. Naruto was finally close to 100% and was glad to see his days in the hospital behind him. He was dressed in his normal shinobi attire, with his Anbu mask the only thing missing. He hadn't had many visitors during his stay in the hospital, which was understandable. But he was surprised when his twin's pink-haired teammate dropped off some flowers for him. He was feigning sleep, so as not to interact with her. They were his brother's teammates, but that didn't mean he would create any bonds of friendship with them. His sensei had only checked in on him the one time, and his twin, surprisingly, kept his distance after the first visit. He knew that Menma was starting to become more independent, and his reliance on Naruto started to dissipate. Taking a deep breath to clear his thoughts, Naruto started making his way towards his and Menma's place. He knew that staying with Menma was a no-no, so he wanted to pick up his mask and some other items. He was hoping to catch his brother, but figured he was out training or on a mission. Finally out of the hospital, brat? A voice came from above him, shaking Naruto from his thoughts. He knew who the voice belonged to, and hoped that she wasn't going to send him to the infirmary once more. He slowly looked up, placing a nervous smile on his face. "Hi Anko-sensei. I was about to come and see you after I pick up my mask," Naruto stated, watching as the smirk on Anko's face widened. Her predatory grin was evident on her face, causing Naruto to gulp and swallow spit. "Run," was all she whispered, as Naruto started dashing, like a rabbit being chased by a predator. The chase was on. "Okay brat, you're going to be assisting in the Chunin exams," Anko stated to her apprentice, whom was currently tied upside down from a branch of a tree. The chase, if you could call it that, was over fairly quickly, with Anko forcing Naruto down the path that she wanted. She had planned this, and placed a myriad of traps throughout Konoha. She activated each perfectly, and Naruto only escaped due to his skill. In the end though, she forced him to her favorite training ground, where her final ambush lay. "It will start in a few weeks, and your role will be pretty simple. The first phase of the exams takes place in the academy. You will be among the Chunin whom are assessing the teams of Trio. Your brother's team will be participating," Anko stated with a smirk. Naruto knew what this meant. Not only was his brother's team going to participate, but the other rookies of his year were also going to be involved. They would actually see Naruto for the first time since the academy. "During the second exam, you will be patrolling the area as Fox. You are not to get involved, in any way shape or form, in the exam. Remember, you're on probation, follow these simple tasks, and everything will be fine," Anko stated, whilst brandishing a kunai. Naruto was slightly nervous as Anko placed the kunai on the rope. In one swift motion, he was free from his confines. "Any questions?" she asked, only for Naruto to shake his head in the negative. "Good, now it's time for some training. Head to T&I, Ibiki is waiting." At the proclamation, Naruto's face lost all expression. He bowed to Anko, before leaving in a burst of speed. He was not looking forward to this. "You will be entering into the Chunin exams," Kakashi stated, much to the pleased faces of Team 7. "You will have to meet at the academy in a few days." He continued as he handed his team the forms for the exams. He looked at them one last time. "Good luck," he exclaimed, before disappearing in a poof of smoke. Menma looked at the paper in front of him, then at Sakura. "If I become a Chunin, will you go on a date with me?" he asked her. Sakura just shook her head and laughed, walking away from her two teammates. This was a regular occurrence. Menma would try to get a date out of Sakura, whilst said girl often laughed the walk off. "You know, she's not really going to say yes if you keep pestering," Sasuke stated, walking past Menma. He continued for a short while, before looking back towards Menma. He was slightly surprised by the look Menma had. Menma, realizing his moment of vulnerability, closed his eyes, smiled his largest smile and rubbed his hand through his hair. "Hee, yeah I know," he exclaimed, not willing to look at Sasuke directly. "Ichiraku?" Sasuke asked, hoping to get Menma out of his current slump. "Yes, I could definitely eat. I wonder if Naruto's been there lately?" Menma stated out loud, whilst catching up to Sasuke. Both started walking towards the ramen establishment. "Haven't spoken to him lately?" Sasuke asked, taking note of the way Menma presented himself. Naruto was often a sour subject. It reminded him of the way his parents, especially his father, would act around Itachi after he had entered Anbu. No, but he must be super busy. Menma exclaimed with a smile, playing it off cool. Naruto was in Training Ground 3, Team 7's favorite ground. He had been there most of the day practicing the genjutsu that was provided to him by the self-proclaimed genjutsu master of Konoha. It's not that Naruto disliked Kurenai, he just found it easy to surpass someone who was supposed to be a specialist. Naruto had already studied the scrolls that Anko had left him with and found ways that each jutsu could be enhanced. This provided him with a slight ego boost, as he felt he was on par with a Jonin. Reality was that he still had much more training to do in order to surpass any Jonin-ranked shinobi of Konoha. I see you completed most of the scrolls Anko provided. An emotionless voice intoned from behind Naruto. It scared Naruto how someone could still sneak up on him. He was aware of his surroundings, yet this Anbu member still got the better of him. Hi Taicho. Naruto stated, trying to convince his senpai, and himself, that he wasn't startled in the slightest. Good to hear, but how are you with your other skills? The voice asked this time, taking note of the way Naruto stopped training to face him. In front of Naruto stood a young man with short brown hair. His face was framed by a mask and his piercing brown eyes bore their way into Naruto's own. I have completed all the tasks set by you, Ibiki, Neiko and Anko. Naruto exclaimed, gazing intently at Yamato. Good, but I'm not really here for a status report. I'm here to let Fox know of the change in his mission parameters for the Chunin exams. At these words, Naruto's ears perked. Anything mission-related often calmed his nerves. He loved his time in Anbu and found it very easy to complete most of the tasks. Killing was a cinch, and it became like second nature for him. So too were the infiltration and intel gathering. You are to present yourself to the academy on the day of the Chunin exams as a participant. Yamato continued, knowing that he had the full attention of his charge. You are to create 2 clones to take up the role of your teammates. Keep in mind that the first test is an hour long. Yamato stated, just as a flutter of leaves fell beside him, indicating the arrival of another person. The distraction didn't faze Yamato, as he continued with the mission parameters. You are to create backstories for each of the clones and you are not to be found out by any of the participants. You must pass the exams with flying colors. This is the first part of your first S-rank mission, Yamato concluded, watching as Naruto's eyes bulged slightly in surprise, before returning to its original form. Your mission changes slightly during the second part of the Chunin exams. Exclaimed the newcomer. Naruto looked into the mask of Neiko, nodding his head to indicate he was listening. He still had not seen what she looks like under the mask but felt it better that way. It felt like an invasion of privacy if he found out. Yamato, on the other hand, always showed his face whenever they were alone, like now for example. It takes place in the Forest of Death, a place you are very familiar with. Neiko continued, noticing the slight smirk Naruto wore. You are to keep a close eye on all the participants, particularly those from Konoha. Try not to interfere too much, but when you do, make it look accidental or coincidental. You are to complete the second phase on the last day, sometime during the last hour. Neiko stated. At the conclusion of her words, Ibiki and Anko appeared, both standing beside Yamato and Neiko. You are to track these people down. Ibiki stated, handing Naruto a piece of paper. And, if possible, interrogate them. Ibiki continued, watching Naruto closely. He knew that Naruto wasn't great at interrogation, and that it was something that he really needed to work at. Naruto looked at the names on the list, storing them in his memory, before destroying the sheet of paper. Some of them may not make it past the first phase, but if they do, they are yours. Ibiki continued. He glanced sideways at Anko, before looking at Naruto once more. We have intel on a supposed infiltration plot during the Chunin exams. Ibiki continued. Naruto was surprised by this statement but decided not to voice any of his questions. Finally, brat. Anko toned in, smiling brightly for once. You are to participate in the final phase of the exam, which is going to be a round-by-round battle. The real you will participate and show people what you are made of, but it may be a little difficult for your clones to do the same. Anko intoned. Naruto figured as much. Upon completion of this mission, Anko continued, we will no longer be your senseis. She concluded, not looking directly at Naruto. At these words, Naruto's face dropped. He felt an ache in his chest, as if butterflies were there, only worse. He looked at each of the shinobi in front of him and was surprised when they nodded back at him. "You have picked up the tea and eye artistry very quickly," Ibiki stated, by way of acknowledgement. "Though you still have much to learn," he concluded. "Your skills in tracking, hiding and intel gathering are superb. There is very little I could teach you." Yamato exclaimed, nodding his head in approval. "I will train you to use a sword, but that will be my final mission with you," Neko exclaimed, before handing Naruto a few scrolls. "These are to get you started," she stated. Naruto took the scrolls and placed them in his pockets. He looked at Anko last. "This is my final gift to you," she exclaimed, summoning a snake with a scroll in its mouth. Naruto was gobsmacked. His favorite teacher was going to give him a summoning contract, but not just any summoning contract, it was the same as hers. He dropped his head, shoulders shaking slightly. A tear fell down his face, before he turned away. He heard the sound of leaves falling, indicating the absence of his teachers. He turned around and was surprised to find Anko still there. "Why the long-faced brat? We'll still be partners after this mission," Anko exclaimed whilst smirking at Naruto. "But that doesn't mean we are equals," she continued, as she pulled out a kunai. Naruto recognized the predatory smirk, before paling slightly. "Run," was all she said, before Naruto took off in a wild dash. Menma was ecstatic to be participating in the Chunin exams. He knew that it would be one step closer to his dream. A dream he had dreamt since his childhood. A dream that even his brother didn't know about, well, he hoped he didn't. He had always felt a close connection with the Sandaime Hokage. He was a grandfatherly figure in Menma's life. He loved hearing stories about the previous Hokages, especially the Yondaime. Menma knew that the Yondaime sealed the Kyuubi into him and his brother, but he was sure that it was a last-ditch effort. He figured that the Kyuubi was unbeatable, and sealing would be the only option. That being said, it still sucked to be treated differently. But now was the time to show the haters the true strength and might of Uzumaki Menma. His thoughts were halted by a scream of help. He looked up in time to see a young kid being bullied by a youth twice his size. Without a thought in the world, Menma approached the scene. "What, can't handle someone your own size?" he asked, gaining the young man's attention. Menma looked at the young man, then towards his partner, a young woman with golden brown hair. He looked back at the young man, noticing the smirk on his face. "Oh yeah, what are you going to do about it, brat?" the young man asked. Menma had already sized up the situation. The young woman had her hitate hung loosely around her neck. He had read the symbol and knew that they, if he read correctly, were from Sanagakure no Sato. He figured they were here to participate in the Chunin exams. "I'll give you to the count of 5. Menma exclaimed, resting his hand on his kunai pouch. "Geez Konkuro, just let the brat go," the kunoichi exclaimed, obviously bored with this false bravado of strength. 1. Menma began to count, as the smirk faded from the newly named Konkuro. 2. He continued, as the kunoichi just rolled her eyes. She was about to approach Konkuro, when she felt killing intent directed at her. She looked up at Menma, a shiver going down her spine. 3. Menma stated, as Konkuro dropped the boy and started reaching for his own kunai pouch. 4. He continued, eyeing Konkuro coolly. The kunoichi started loosening her fan, ready to assist if need be. "Halt!" A new voice interrupted Menma and Konkuro's standoff. They both looked towards a single shinobi of the Anbu Corp. He was around their age with golden spiky hair. He was dressed the same as other Anbu members, and his mask was that of a fox. Fighting in the streets and fighting before the start of the Chunin exams is prohibited. Fox exclaimed, looking calmly at both his brother and Konkuro. "If you want to forfeit your chance of making Chunin, then please, continue." He stated, a hint of boredom in his tone. "Konkuro, what are you doing?" a cold, distant voice exclaimed. Fox was slightly alarmed. Not many people can get past his senses, and this shinobi almost did. It was at the last second that he felt his presence. "Gagara, we were just..." "Shut it, or I'll kill you," the red-headed shinobi exclaimed, looking intently at the kunoichi who just spoke. "We were just having some fun." Konkuro stuttered out, scared of the new arrival. Menma, being who he is, looked at the newcomer. "What's your name?" he asked. Gaara disappeared in a swirl of sand and landed directly behind his teammates. "It's not polite to ask for a name, without first giving one," he stated with his back towards Menma. Uzumaki Menma, he stated in slight annoyance. He still had his hand on his kunai pouch. Gara no Subaku, the redhead exclaimed, before turning and walking away. He stopped for a second, before looking at Fox. And you Anbu-san. The image of Fox faded in that instant, indicating his absence. Unfazed, Gara continued walking, his siblings catching up to him. Menma looked at the young boy, still sitting on the ground. You okay? He asked in a soft tone. Yeah, thanks, the kid stated before standing. My name is Konohamaru. He smiled, whilst scratching the back of his head nervously. What's your name? He asked, glee evident on his face. Menma, what are you doing out here all alone? Menma asked, interested to hear what this child had to say. Konohamaru looked left and right, making sure the coast was clear. I snuck away from my sensei and was playing hide and seek with my friends. They still haven't caught me, and my sensei doesn't know where I am. He stated, smiling greatly, as if he accomplished something grand. Menma looked at Konohamaru for a second, deep in contemplation. The look caused Konohamaru to gaze into Menma's eyes, before a frown appeared on his face. Why would you need a sensei? Menma asked, trying, but failing to keep the sarcasm out of his voice. Konohamaru, not noticing or caring about the sarcasm, continued his answer as if it were the most natural thing. I'm going to be Hokage someday, and then everyone will notice me for me. They'll stop calling me honorable grandson all the time. He stated, slight venom dripping into the honorable grandson part. Menma laughed out loud. He couldn't help it. He laughed so hard that he broke out in stitches. He just found it so funny. Here he was, having the exact same thoughts as this 8-year-old kid. The title of Hokage was highly contested, even if the competition was a child. Konohamaru, unaware of Menma's train of thought, started turning red. He was angry at someone laughing at his dream, regardless of how it made him look. He was about to voice his thoughts when Menma stopped laughing, looked him straight in the eye, and started speaking. It seems I'm not the only one looking for recognition, Menma stated, having gained Konohamaru's full attention. Though, I guarantee that I'll be Hokage long before you. Believe it, he stated, whilst posing with his thumbs up. Konohamaru was silent for a second, before laughing. He looked at Menma, just as he heard his voice being called. Sorry Menma, looks like I have to go. Konohamaru exclaimed, recognizing the sound of his sensei. But from this day forth, we are rivals. He concluded, before making a quick dash. Menma was surprised at that last bit of information. He continued looking until Konohamaru disappeared behind a corner. Weird kid, he thought to himself before walking away. Home was his destination, time for a rest to re-energize. He had a very long day tomorrow.